Good evening and welcome to the second session of our Plymouth Special Summer Town Meeting being held live Thursday, August 13th, 2020 at 6 p.m. We're continuing to make history as our Plymouth Town Meeting legislature is being convened by remote participation pursuant to Chapter 92 of the Massachusetts Acts of 2020. Acting Town Clerk Pearl Sears has advised me that we now have a quorum of at least 90 elected town meeting members, and I therefore declare that a quorum being present, the Plymouth Special Town Meeting will come to order at 6:01 p.m. Nicole Manfredi will once again serve as Assistant Town Moderator. Welcome, Nicole. And Nicole, what do you have for us this evening?
So, in regards to Monday night, it was very successful. I had several town meeting members reach out and share their pleasure with regards to the process. We had very few calls to the help desk regarding technology. I think we had less than 20. At this point this evening, I think we've had 2. So it looks like we've managed to work out all of the technology kinks. We have a small group of folks over at Plymouth North High School that are participating remotely with support from some high school students. They're socially distancing and following all the precautions, and it looks like we're ready to go.
Thank you. Following Monday night's meeting, we had a report from Option Technologies. We found that most of the people who were voting in less than 30 seconds. There are only a few that took a little longer. So tonight, we're going to try to reduce the time for voting to 45 seconds, and we're going to monitor throughout the evening to determine whether or not that'll be further changed if we have another adjourned session. In addition, I will not be showing displays on the results of a procedural motion, such as a motion to close debate, unless it's close. Also, on any of the substantive motions, if they are unanimous, we will not be showing the precinct displays. Again, we're trying to be mindful of the time being contributed by town meeting members. And speaking of that, I'd like to congratulate Plymouth Town Meeting. On Monday night, we had 125 town meeting members. In my 30 years as town moderator, we have not had that number. In fact, Pearl Sears, the acting town clerk, reviewed the records for the past 10 years, and it was the highest number. And also the average for the 10 years was 110 town meeting members. So while some people had concerns about disenfranchisement, in fact, the result of this virtual town meeting is it's providing an opportunity for more town meeting members to participate remotely, regardless of whether they're in Plymouth. So I'd like to thank town meeting members for your participation and for the high level of percentage of town meeting members, since we have a total of 135 that have been elected. We once again welcome Mark Rich of Copeman and Page, who will continue to serve as town council throughout tonight's session of town meeting. Welcome, Mr. Rich. You see him. There are only a few of us in the studio. We're social distancing. We're also joined by Julie Thompson. She's the executive director of PAC TV. She joins us in the studio with 2 representatives from OTI Technologies. And together, PAC TV and OTI Technologies will continue to support our Zoom webinar and V-Voter platforms throughout town meeting. According to our town charter, Chapter 2, Section 5, Subsection 2, the town clerk keeps a record of attendance, and pursuant to the next subsection, a representative town meeting member who cannot attend a session shall provide written notice to the town clerk. Anyone wishing to inquire as to reasons given for town meeting absence should check with the town clerk. We're aware of 4 town meeting members who will be absent and 1 who will be late. Also, pursuant to Chapter 2, Section 10, Subsection 2 of the Charter, representative town meeting members shall notify the town clerk in writing prior to the town meeting session as to any articles giving rise to financial conflict of interest. Town meeting members are also reminded the V-Voter platform includes an option to abstain if needed. And in accordance with Section 8A8 of the Chapter 92 Acts of 2020, registered voters residing in the town wishing to participate in a remote town meeting shall submit a written request to the town clerk not less than 48 hours in advance of town meeting. Upon receipt of the request, the clerk shall verify the requesting voter's registration status, and again tonight, 2 registered voters have requested to participate. We will recess within 2 hours from the start of this meeting as provided in our charter. Mr. Canty moves that an adjourned session of this town meeting be held remotely on Tuesday, August 18 at 6 p.m. Discussion, and I'm not seeing anyone requesting to speak, so we're going to go right to the vote. Tonight you're going to see on your screen the seconds ticking down. Actually, I have one point of order, so I'm going to call on Precinct 10, Alan Costello, with a point of order before we vote on a motion for an adjourned session. Alan, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for taking my call.
Go ahead.
Is there a delay?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
Yeah, I'm speaking. I'd like to know if town meeting, the body, has an option to discuss and vote on the changes that you've just outlined. And when we voted to have this virtual town meeting, it was clearly stated that all votes would be roll call voted and recorded for historical purposes. I, for one, don't care about the 45 seconds. I thought the technology was working. However, as far as the statistical record, I have no problem going into a third night. To lose that historical record would be disappointing to me.
Mr. Costello, I'm glad you asked the question because I may not have been clear. There will be a record and there will be roll call votes on all motions, including procedural motions. However, in order to speed up town meeting a little bit, I am not going to display that after the vote. We'll still have a record, people could check it afterwards, but if we have a unanimous vote, I'm not going to be displaying that. And also, if we have a procedural motion, such as to dissolve for the adjourned session and so on. On the adjourned session, this one, I can show it just for practice, but in order to save time, where they're not a substantive article, we're not going to be displaying it. But yes, we'll have a roll call vote and there will be a record.
Well, what option do I have to ask the body to vote on these changes?
You don't. It's the prerogative of the moderator. But thank you for your question. And now we're going to move on and we're going to vote on whether to have an adjourned session on Tuesday. So as soon as it shows up on the screen, we're going to begin the voting, and it's showing up, and we're going to start the voting now. 45 seconds. You'll see the voting will end in 45 seconds. We're showing the clock, and we're continuing. And after that, I see I have another person who wanted to speak on the motion. I didn't see it soon enough, so I apologize for that. But we will see what the vote is. I will tell you that there was a poll conducted of town meeting members, and the results of the poll were that more people requested Tuesday rather than Saturday, which is why the motion this evening was framed for the Tuesday adjourned session. We have 11 seconds. Town meeting members are voting on yes, whether or not to have an adjourned session on August 18. No would be not to have it. The voting has now ended, and at this point we have the vote. 107 say yes, 3 say no, 0 abstentions. The motion carries. I'm not going to go through the precincts. This is a good example. 107 people. It's not close, and it's procedural. So I'm not going to be showing that in the interest of time. Rather, I'd like to get right to our business this evening, which is that we're going to start where we left off, which was with Article 8 in the special town meeting. And you'll see in Article 8, and I want to say as we start this evening, we have received many motions and many requests to speak on motions. So we're going to do the best we can. We believe we've got it right in the preparation done in advance. But if for some reason you asked to speak, you didn't get your name called, please then click on the button. For example, I have quite a few people who have asked to speak on this. And Mr. Canty moves the town vote to appropriate $30 million to pay the costs of construction, demolition, equipping, and furnishing of a new fire headquarters at 91 Long Pond Road. Mr. Canty is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Canty, on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In a vote of 12-1 with no abstentions, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Article 8. Approval of Article 8 will authorize $30 million in funds for a new fire headquarters at 91 Long Pond Road due to the extremely poor conditions at the current headquarters. The problems at the current headquarters are such that repairs there are not economically feasible, and a new headquarters is therefore needed. Approval of this article would necessitate a debt exclusion override at the ballot box.
Thank you. And the quantum of vote on the main motion is 2/3. However, we do have a motion to amend, and that'll be a majority vote. And we're going to read into the record that motion to amend so that we can be debating both the main motion and the motion to amend. And the first vote to close debate would be on the motion to amend. Peter Savan, Precinct 15, moves to amend Article 8 to delete the third, which is the last sentence, reading, "No amount shall be borrowed or expended pursuant to this vote unless the town shall have voted to exclude the amounts required to repay any borrowing undertaken in accordance with this vote from the limitation on total property taxes imposed by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C, also known as Proposition 2.5. And at this time, I'm going to invite Peter Savan to Precinct 15 to speak on your motion. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is Peter Savan from Precinct 15. This amendment, if the motion passes, will keep the debt service for the $30 million as inside debt. As the town manager and finance director would tell you, as inside debt, the approximately 1.9 million annual debt service must fit within the operating budget, which is capped by Prop 2.5. Raising more revenue beyond the cap requires an operational override voted on by the taxpayers. So why make this change? Simply put, our budget is growing faster than our revenues. Even well before the pandemic, over the past 5 years, the amount of revenue required from Plymouth's property taxpayers has grown 1.5 times as fast as our property values have increased. This is unsustainable. In addition, revenues from large tax-paying sources, the Pilgrim nuclear plant, are decreasing. The large annual growth in property values from the Pine Hills development will soon be at an end. If our leadership will or cannot bring the budget under control, we will face an operational override vote, which has been mentioned several times. Let tax-paying voters decide now, sooner rather than later. The focus should be on taxes, not on this or that debt. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Peter Savan, Precinct 15, moving to amend Special Town Meeting Article 8. Now, just by way of explanation to those of you who are watching on PAC TV, town meeting members can click on their V-voter application that they wish to speak on the motion. In addition, I encourage town meeting members to contact me in advance if they want to be on a speaker's list, so that way, if for some reason we don't see them on the V-voter right away, I have them on a list. Now that I have two lists, I try to first go through and give speaking priority to people who haven't spoken or may not have spoken as much as others. So we're going to begin with Precinct 11, Ronald Reilly, followed by Precinct 2, Michael Leary. Mr. Reilly, good evening and welcome. We're debating Special Town Meeting Article 8. Go ahead. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ron Reilly, Precinct 11. Good evening. There's a lot of talk regarding this article. I've always backed the fire and police. This is a lot of money, and I'm getting a negative feeling from all the talk that's going on as far as this going through. And I think I have a resolution for it, if I could. One, I'd just like to say that coming from the other direction towards the waterfront at exit 5, I think we've all experienced that traffic. There's 2 lanes. It's a right-hand bend in the road. It's going to be a blind coming around traffic, and the other side of it's going to be on the oncoming traffic, because that traffic would not be able to get out of the way. Even with sirens, this is going to be a mess in my eyes trying to get through that. And it'd be a ongoing, it's not a one-time drive. The town owns a building in West Plymouth across from the airport, the old school department building. And so what I'm proposing is, why can't the administrative part of the fire department move there? Parking isn't, it's a problem at the station now, coming from down and back up and into the building. That would alleviate that. It would open up the fire station for remodeling, for bedrooms upstairs. And I don't know about downstairs if they'd gain any room, but this is a fire station. We've built satellite stations for a reason, so that headquarters didn't have to supply the town. It's its own station. We have Pine Hills, we have Manamet, we have North, we have West. And the new station was just built at 6.8 million. I don't see why we need 30 for a headquarters. And if we could just either remodel the station that's there, or when in time build a new station out at exit 5, it would be a less of a burden on the taxpayers to build this. And I would seriously like the town to seriously consider this proposal. And I hope everybody's in favor of this.
Thank you, Ronald Reilly, town meeting member. We're going to go to Michael Leary, Precinct 2, followed by Cheryl Fischer, Precinct 6. Good evening, Mr. Leary.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Okay. So Mike Leary, Precinct 2. So I have a couple questions, but I'm gonna comment on it first. I was involved in Kingston government back when we moved the fire station in Kingston from Elm Street up to Smith Lane. And of course, there was a contamination problem there. The town of Kingston still is dealing with that building to this date because of the contamination. The one thing is, once this is contaminated, it's got a use restriction on it. You can't stop using that building. Sometimes you can't even change the use of that building, which in Kingston, they store extra fire stuff there. So, we're leaving behind a problem if you're moving this up to Long Pond Road. I want to know, the first question, I got a couple, but the first one was the environmental affairs or somebody on the contamination consulted on this? Because I have a feeling we're just leaving behind a bigger problem. That's one. Two is, just like Ronald pointed out, I have a feeling, rather than reading the documentation, it's more of a question of keeping the businesses offices there and expanding is what's causing the problem. Again, I'm kind of like Ronald. Why not fix up the old building and move the offices? We just built the new building up on North Plymouth for the fire station. We could move the offices up there, even if we had to put a small addition on it. That doesn't have contamination. Because my feeling is, this, if you do move it and the use changes, we're going to have to fix this up with the contamination anyways. So I have an issue with moving that. So I guess my questions would be was environmental affairs or somebody consulted on the contamination and what it is leaving behind? The two is, just like Ronald, I would like to know if the alternate sites were looked at. Why not the Kingston one, the North Plymouth one, or
30
one of
seconds.
the other buildings? And I guess that's it.
Thank you, and that's Michael Leary, town meeting member. We're going to go to our Plymouth Fire Chief, Edward Bradley. responding to the two questions posed by Mr. Leary, and also one of them was posed by Mr. Reilly. Welcome, Chief Bradley, to Plymouth Special Town Meeting. And
So I'm going to answer the first question and then invite up Chief Bradley to speak to the second question. The first
okay,
question is,
go ahead. This is Melissa Arrighi, and she's our Plymouth Town Manager. Welcome.
thank you very much. So I'd like to speak to the first part of the question, which was about the environmental work that we did at the Long Pond Road site. You may recall that we've tried to sell this building before, and as part of that process, we were required to do some initial 21E work, which we did complete, and we made that information available to the public and to any potential buyer. So we feel that we're in good shape in terms of any cleanup that would be required there. We've done that preliminary work. I think the second part of the question that the town meeting representative had would be best answered by the fire chief in terms of why the offices could not just be put in one of the other fire stations at this point. So let me bring Chief Bradley up.
Thank you. And that was Melissa Arrighi, and she is Plymouth's Town Manager. We're now going to go to the Plymouth Fire Chief, Edward Bradley. Good evening, Chief Bradley.
Good evening, thank you. The administrative offices don't have to be with the central fire station. Obviously, they could be separated. It just seems that building two facilities, one to house the fire suppression unit and another to house the business office would be more money. As far as on the other stations, they're substations. They're built to handle just the load that's in the substations. They do not have the room for the any of the offices, and anything on the second floor, which a lot of them have, would require elevators. The same kind of an issue that we have at the current station.
Thank you. We're going to go to Precinct 6, Cheryl Fischer, followed by Precinct 5, Patricia McCarthy. We're debating Article 8 of the Special Town Meeting warrant. Good evening, Cheryl Kingfisher.
Good evening, Cheryl Kingfisher, Precinct 6. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hello, town meeting members. I am personally going to vote no on this article this evening, largely because I believe that we need a lot more documentation as town meeting members to see how the town select board and employees have gotten us to the proposal that's on the table. I have a concern also that putting a particular price tag out there, 30 million, as is the case, which suggests to me that after the real specs for a new facility are done, we should send those out as we always do and call for proposals and see what the spread of prices are. I know if I were a contractor and I saw that, the town was willing to pay up to $30 million for this, I would probably be inclined to make my bid be under that, but come close to it. So I don't like the idea at this point of putting that kind of a price tag on the proposal. I certainly think that we have to deal with the current facility on Sandwich Road. Street. I don't think that we can stay there. And another thing that's really lacking for me in my trying to review this is to know whether or not we actually have a current, say, 20-year plan for the fire department, looking at the kind of growth that's going on. I'm sure that my town meeting members have a whole bunch of other questions as well. I don't need answers to those now. I would like to see this go back to the drawing boards, bring it back to us either in October or next spring with a significant more documentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl Kingfisher. We're going to go to a point of order. Precinct 15, Peter Savan, followed by Precinct 5, Patricia McCarthy. Mr. Savan, your point of order?
Mr. Moderator, I believe it is wrong of you to conflate discussion and debate on my amendment with the main motion. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to have discussion and vote on the amendment first? Because some of us, including me specifically, would like to comment on the main motion as well. But it seems to me we should deal with the amendment first, then the discussion on the main motion. Thank you.
I appreciate your point of order, but in the past, this is the way I've handled it when we've had multiple motions, because it provides us with an opportunity to discuss either the main motion or the motion to amend. And again, speaking priority will be given to those who have spoken less, in which time now we're going to go to Precinct 5, Patricia McCarthy, and she'll be followed by Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. Patricia McCarthy, welcome.
Thank you. With regards to the amendment and the main motion, I am in favor of the main motion as stated, and I've reached my conclusion from having watched the presentations at the different meetings and getting extra data provided to me and understanding the great need we have for the fire station. No doubt in my mind that there's a great need. And that the cost factors will just keep going up as in the past when we haven't acted appropriately. And I do feel a debt exclusion is the proper way to go because it gives everybody a voice who wants to vote on the issue. And I have two questions for Lynn Barrett. And I would like Lynn Barrett to comment or speak to the debt roll-off that's coming from as we go into, it'll probably be year 12 or 13 by the time the fire station comes online. The debt exclusion, debt roll-off from Plymouth North High School and the Council on Aging building, they were both opened in 2012. So we started to borrow money on that a little earlier. And I would like her to comment on if in fact the amendment passes, and if in fact the main motion passes, what is the process for the town to do a debt exclusion if that language is removed? From the statute, from the way I've read it, the Board of Selectmen, my understanding, and I could be wrong, is a 2/3 vote, and they can put the debt exclusion on the ballot. And I would like Lynn Barrett, please, to answer those two questions. Thank you.
Lynn Barrett is the Director of Finance. Lynn, welcome this evening. Could you respond to Patricia McCarthy?
Good evening, town meeting. Thank you, moderator. So as far as the debt roll-off or drop-off, as town meeting members may or may not know, when we borrow for a project, we do what's called level principal. And what that means is you pay more interest upfront than you do near the end of the amortization. So for a 30-year project, you're paying more at the beginning than you are at the end on an annual basis. So our debt tends to drop off over the years. And we have a policy of having our debt service budget be between like 5 and 8% of our operating budget. And we live within those guidelines. So as debt drops off, when we have projects that are submitted, we look at that space where we can fit some additional projects. So from like 2020, our debt was at about, or 2021, the budget that you're looking at right now, the debt service budget is about almost 17 million. Within the next 10 years, it's going to drop down to almost 10 million. So that's a drop of about $8 million. So between the projects that we've already authorized town meeting for and some of these new projects, we have room to fit that in. The other side of the coin is when we talked about the amendment with regards to the debt exclusion, in the town felt very strongly for transparency purposes and to let town meeting members know and taxpayers know that if we were to do this particular project, that we would not be able to fit it within our levy limit because we were getting closer to our levy limit based on budget growth and revenues and other revenues and that kind of thing. So we've been talking about that for a while, working with the selectmen and other committees on trying to come up with, a policy on budget growth for the future. So excluding that amendment, excluding that language from the article, even though town meeting would be authorizing, if it were to pass, and then town meeting were to authorize a $30 million fire station building, the selectmen still have the authority to vote by 2/3. Add that to a future election, a future ballot as a debt exclusion question. That sentence doesn't have to be in there. We just like to put it in there because that's how we would plan on funding this project. If town meeting were to exclude it, the select board could then decide, obviously, not to put it on as a debt exclusion, and we would choose not to do the project because we really couldn't afford it within our levy limit. So they do have some options. So either including that language or not including it doesn't necessarily mean that the selectmen can't vote by 2/3 to actually add it to a ballot in the future.
Thank you. Lynn Barrett is the Director of Finance. I've been told by the studio, when you've been recognized with speaking privileges on deck, please silence any equipment and try to be quiet until you're called on to avoid any interference with the speaker. We're going to go to Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti, followed by Precinct 11, Kenneth Howe. Mr. Malaguti, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. Like a lot of my town meeting members that have spoke previously, I am voting no on this article. One, because the constituents that I have talked to from many different precincts have voiced extreme opposition to the spending and borrowing that's being done in this town, and that's being a vast burden on all taxpayers in this community. While I represent just one precinct, I feel that I also partially represent other precincts as well, since our votes all make a difference to every part of the community, not just the one that we represent. I believe that there was little thought being done into this article, as there was just, in some instances, just asking, how much do you believe it would cost to put a fire station there, based on speculation from the recent fire station being done in North Plymouth. I also believe no other options were looked at for a fire station location. One that I can think of that I've talked with many people about is the old Entergy Training Center off Exit 4, which is very easy in and out for access, which is more geographically appropriate for a fire station and is more conducive to the environment that that building is located in. I'm hoping that all town meeting members vote no on this article to represent their constituents' voices and to keep the taxpayers' voice accountable to the selectmen and to hold them accountable to the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. That is Everett Malaguti. We're going to go to Precinct 11, Kenneth Howe, followed by Precinct 8, Don Williams. Mr. Howe, good evening.
Good evening. I agree 100% with Ron on Precinct 11. First of all, we had a precinct caucus with 11 and 13, and I would say the majority there felt the same way as what Ron was saying. And I found it's a dangerous situation where they want to go into Long Pond Road. And I totally agree with changing it. I would definitely vote no on the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth Howe. And we're now going to continue with Don Williams, to be followed by Precinct 13, Joseph Barron. Mr. Williams, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Do you hear me?
We do. Welcome.
Good. I've done a lot of serious thinking about some of these budget issues, and it seems to me that the conundrum that we're in is we have to decide whether we are responsible to the employees in the town or to the taxpayers. And I, for one, and all of us were elected by the taxpayers. And I suspect that if this were put to Proposition 2.5, that the taxpayers would rise up and say, no, this is not right. My opinion then is that I'm not going to vote for this. I think that we can put it off to a time when we have a little bit more vision of what the financial situation of the town is going to be. I hope we do that, because I believe our first responsibility is to the people who elected us. And that responsibility, I think, at this point, is to try to be more conservative financially. And assuming this kind of debt, I don't think is appropriate for the current situation. So thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, town meeting members.
Thank you. And I just received a motion to close debate. So Precinct 11, Kenneth Howe, moves to close debate. It's not debatable. It's a 2/3 vote. At this time, we're going to show the speaker's queue. And in addition to the speaker's queue, I have one other person who notified me in advance that this person wished to speak. So we're going to now take a vote on whether to close debate. It requires a 2/3 vote. As soon as it's on the screen, we're going to vote. And so you'll see it momentarily show up on the screen. This is a procedural vote. It's now on the screen. We're now going to begin voting now. And town meeting members see that the voting icon is on here and that it is counting down. We're going to continue after this. And if we close debate, we'll be voting on the motion to amend. If we continue, then we'll be debating the motion to amend and the main motion. And town meeting members, once again, are in their second night. This is coming to you live on Thursday, August 13. It's the virtual town meeting. Town meetings members are participating remotely. We have, I believe, up to 6 people at Plymouth North High School. We have town officials at Town Hall in the Great Room. You'll see that voting is now ending, and we have the total. 52 in favor, 63 in opposition. The motion does not carry. We're not going to show that it is not close. And so now we're going to continue with Precinct 13, Joseph Barron, to be followed by Precinct 3, Donna Curtin. Mr. Barron, good evening. Joseph Barron is a town meeting member. This is coming to you live this evening, and he is Precinct 13. Good evening, Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Town meeting members.
Go ahead. Mr. Barron. I think maybe we have lost him, his connection. So we'll come back to him.
The history of the firehouse at its current location and the need for a new fire headquarters. I just want to comment on a lot has been said about how dangerous that intersection is on Long Pond Road. As I mentioned earlier when I spoke, I'm a 40-year firefighter veteran, now retired from the city of Quincy. This community is growing dramatically, and we see streetlights popping up in numerous locations. Fire apparatus have a system, it's called an Opticom system, as police and ambulance have. They turn the lights green in the direction that the emergency vehicles are flowing. And they've served to empty the intersections ahead of the fire apparatus. And the drivers of fire apparatus are trained specifically. So unfortunately, we're going to see more traffic as the community grows, and it does point for the need for more of these services. The property selected does comply with the intent of the National Fire Protection Association, the NFPA 1710 standard for the organization and the deployment of fire suppression operations and their arrival times. And it reads as follows. 4 minutes or less for the arrival of the first arriving engine company at a suppression incident, and or 8 minutes or less for the deployment of a full first alarm assignment at a fire suppression incident. According to the NFPA 1710, the fire department shall establish the performance objective of not less than 90%
30 seconds
of these response. These standards are adopted by reference in building codes, and the National Fire Protection Association writes the National Electric Code. The location of the new fire headquarters approaches this objective. This standard is used by the Insurance Services Organization
Thank you,
for
Mr.
rating
Barron.
emergency services and
Mr.
setting the
Barron,
rates
thank you.
charged.
That your time is up, and we'll come back to you again if we have time. This time we're going to go to Precinct 3, Donna Curtin. She'll be followed by Precinct 10, Robert Duggan. Good evening, Donna Curtin.
Good evening.
Go ahead, we can hear you. Put your mic back on. We heard you for a moment.
Can you hear me now, Mr.
Yes,
Moderator?
we can.
Thank
Continue.
you. Good
Thank
evening,
you.
town meeting members. I would really like to be an advocate for this article. I have a very high regard for Chief Bradley. I think it's really important for our community to express support and provide the necessary resources to those who are on the front lines of our public safety every day. And I think the chief and the town have done a very good job in establishing the need for this project. Clearly, there are many deficiencies with the current facility. This is something that's going to have to be addressed. But I do think we have not done so well in establishing what the appropriate solution is. There are so many questions about the location that has been designated, about the cost of this project, and especially about the timing of this project. I would also like to add to the comments, fellow town meeting member Cheryl Fischer, I think, pointed it out very nicely, as others have, that the quality of the public discussion that we have had in advance of this article, I think, is really shocking to me. Remember back to the level of discussion and debate we had when the proposal for a $35 million new town hall came before this body. There was tremendous amounts of information, debate, argument, things in the newspapers, things happening at our caucus meetings. We haven't seen anything like this. And this is an equivalent level of project. It just is astonishing to me that we seem to be poised to go forward with this without really having done the work that this kind of a project needs. I think also I would say to my fellow town meeting members, we really need to be able to assess what our current economic situation is right now. And I don't think anybody in our virtual room right now can tell us what our wonderful, strong local economy is going to look like next year, or the year after, or perhaps even the year after. There are forces larger than all of us going on right now, and that's going to impact our economy. I've been hearing from my constituents too. I think the time is premature. I look forward, hopefully, to seeing a stronger, better timed, well thought out project that suits the needs of the immediate moment and helps protect our taxpayers and our constituents. I will be voting no on this. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. We have a point of order. Precinct 8, Catherine Holmes, and then we'll go to Precinct 10, Robert Duggan. Catherine Holmes, on your point of order.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
So the man that spoke before, typically in a town meeting, we've always been able to vote to allow them to extend their time to continue speaking. And I think that we need to continue to support that policy. Virtual shouldn't change the way that we do business as much as we possibly can. Is there a reason why we're not allowing him to continue his thoughts?
Yes, the reason is I didn't get a point of order or a request for a motion from someone, and so we continued on. But if I get a point of order when someone is being cut off and you then want to extend, but I didn't get it at the time, I'll tell you right now that we do have 10 people waiting to speak, up to 3 minutes each. That's another half hour just with the speakers we have currently. But I would be happy to.
I completely understand that, but it is a $30 million article, and I think that everybody has the right to be heard on it, since it will directly impact their taxes. So if you could consider that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just say further, I did invite Mr. Barron to come back on the speakers list if he wanted to speak. And he did speak the other night on the other fire station article. So I have tried to bring him in now twice, where some people hasn't spoken yet. I see one right now, and it's going to be on deck. Precinct 10, We have Robert Duggan, to be followed by.
Are they muting us after are we supposed, are they going to mute us after, or are we doing that ourselves?
If you could also mute yourself, that would be helpful, but we are muting people. Precinct 10, Robert Duggan, followed by Precinct 3, Gerald Sirrico. Good evening, Mr. Duggan. He's on the Plymouth North Zoom. He's calling in, and we're going to patch him in.
Nope.
Has he called in yet?
Nope. They renamed their computer at the high school.
Plymouth North Zoom, can we just call in, recognize that on the Zoom webinar platform? He's one of the people there. I've been told we're going to go to the next speaker, and we'll come back to Mr. Duggan. So let's go to Precinct 3, Gerald Sirrico, and we'll come back to Robert Duggan. Mr. Sirrico, good evening. Gerald Sirrico is Precinct 3. We're debating Special Town Meeting Article 8, and we have a motion to amend. Gerald Sirrico, Precinct 3. Do we have him on the line? So Gerald Sirrico, Precinct 3. Is he also at Plymouth North? So they're both at Plymouth North, and Assistant Town Moderator Nicole Manfredi will call them. We'll come back to Mr. Duggan, Mr. Sirrico. We're going to go now to Richard Neely, Precinct 15, and Richard Neely, Precinct 15. Good evening, Mr. Neely. This is
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
In all of our discussions, I think we're losing track of one thing, and that is the practical cost of the whole situation. $30 million is what would be borrowed. At the end of 30 years, you would be paying an additional $23,250,000. So we're talking about a $55 million building over 30 years. I just want to point out the impact of that on the tax situation for the average house in Plymouth, which I'm assuming is $350,000, would be an additional $78 a year, the first year. Those are the numbers that I have calculated from the amortization schedule on the Plymouth Town site. Because of the significant impact of that on the town taxpayers, I will be voting in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard Neely. We're now going to go to Precinct. Do we have Plymouth North yet?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, we're going to try to bring in Robert Duggan, followed by Gerald Sirrico from Plymouth North. Mr. Duggan, are you with us? This is Plymouth Town Meeting. It's a special town meeting, and it's coming to you live.
Can you hear me, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, good evening. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Robert Duggan, Precinct 10.
Go ahead.
Mr. Moderator, I want to speak on the fact that I don't believe these proposals should move forward, so I'm voting against both of them until my fellow Town 10 Precinct Meeting member, Peter Neville's recommendation that leasing buildings in these major expenditures be something that's taken into consideration prior to them arriving on the lap of town meeting. Now, the other night, I actually thought when Peter brought it up that seemed very acceptable to the town manager. So given that forum, I'm voting no. And I urge all other town meeting members to vote no until we consider leasing buildings in any major expenditure. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. And that was Robert Duggan. We're going to continue now with Gerald Sirrico. Do we have Mr. Sirrico on the line? Is he at Plymouth North? This is Precinct 3, Gerald Sirrico. This is Plymouth Special Town Meeting. It's coming to you live on Thursday, August 13. We began at 6 o'clock, and we're in the middle of debating Article 8 on the warrant. We don't have Mr. Sirrico, so at this time, we're going to go to a point of order. Precinct 5, Belinda Brewster. Good evening, Belinda Brewster, and your point of order? Belinda Brewster is a town meeting member in Precinct 5. Point of orders take precedent over the speakers. Good evening, Belinda. Unmute, please.
Is she not unmuted? She needs to unmute.
So she has talking privileges, I'm told, and she needs to unmute. So,
Can you hear me now?
yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay.
Continue.
I just have a point of order. I think it would be helpful right now on your screen and on our V-Voter screen, you simply have the town logo. I think it would be very helpful that during these times, especially on motions with a lot of discussion, that we get to see the list of speakers who are waiting. If we were all together, we would know, A, how many are waiting all the time, and we would know who they are. Just think that would be very helpful.
Thank you, Belinda Brewster. We're not going to be able to show that all the time. We are going to show that when there's a motion to close debate, so you will know who is still in the queue. At this time, do we have Gerald Sirrico? And if we don't, we're going to go to Precinct 11, Christopher Merrill, Precinct 11. Good evening, Mr. Merrill.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I will be voting against Article 8. One of the concerns I have is that there's been eroding confidence in the municipal bond market, which has been creating higher yields in the market. And then the other thing, there's unanticipated revenue losses and higher expenses for many municipalities throughout the nation, and Plymouth will be one of them. The other thing that I have concerns about is Massachusetts continues to have the highest unemployment rate in the country. So with that, I will be voting against Article 8. Thank you.
Thank you. And we now go to a motion to close debate from Daniel Gorsica. Daniel Gorsica is in Precinct 13. This is a motion to end debate. We're now showing the queue. In addition to those on the queue, we have a town resident who has previously asked to speak. So we're going to go to that. And before we take the vote on the motion to close debate, we have a point of order from Precinct 10, Alan Costello. We invite Alan Costello to go ahead, Mr. Costello.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. I would ask you to hold up your motion to close debate until you have satisfactorily gotten through to Mr. Sirrico, who is on the waiting list to speak. And due to the technology, for some reason or another, coming from the high school, has not been able to do that.
He's not at the high school. He was there the other night. I was misunderstood. I believe he's at home this evening, but no. Motions to close debate take priority. I'll go back to Mr. Sirrico after we vote if we do not move to close debate. This is a motion to close debate on Mr. Savan's motion to amend. I'm going to read that one more time. Town meeting members have the text, but the motion to amend to delete the third last sentence reading, "No amount shall be borrowed or expended pursuant to this vote unless the town shall have voted to exclude the amounts required to repay any borrowing undertaken in accordance with this vote from the limitation on total property taxes imposed by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 21C, also known as Proposition 2.5. You're now voting on whether to close debate on the motion to amend. Let's call that up on the screen so town meeting members can vote on that motion. Please start your voting now. You have 45 seconds in which to vote. Once you complete this voting, we're then going to be going back to debate on the main motion, and the next person that I will call on will once again be Gerald Sirrico, who I believe we may have a connection with him. But currently, town meeting members are voting on whether to close debate on the motion to amend. If we do vote to close debate, we will then vote on the motion to amend and then go back to the main motion for further debate until we have a motion to close debate on that. You'll see as we count down on the voting, Plymouth Town Meeting is in the middle of special town meeting Article 8 on a new fire station. The voting is now ending. We're going to have the total. The total is 69 in favor, 47 no. We're going to continue. We're not closing debate on the motion to amend. We do not have a 2/3 vote. We're going to go to Precinct 3, Gerald Sirrico. Do we have Mr. Sirrico? Gerald Sirrico is on Precinct 3, and he is a town meeting member from that precinct.
Yes, I'm here, Steve. Can you hear me?
Good evening, Mr. Sirrico. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes. Proceed.
Yeah, can you hear me, Steve?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I wasn't at the school last week, and I'm not there this week. And, okay, I just wanted to say a little bit about what Donna Curtin said. I believe that what she said was my consensus of opinion also. And I'm not at the school, Steve. I haven't been there since 1965.
Good.
And I was asked not to come back. This motion, the whole problem that I see is that we don't have enough information, number one. Number two, I had a lawyer tell me a long time ago, you don't make a paper agreement and on a napkin. And that's what this seems to be. They bring back a price with not a lot of information. I think the same thing happened to us with the parking garage. Someone said they could build it for X amount of dollars, and then it cost the PDGC more money. So that's why I'm voting against this. I think it's too premature. I think it's a lot of money, and I don't think it was that well presented. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Gerald Sirrico. Precinct 3. We're going to Precinct 4, Jean Patnode Lane. I believe she is at the high school. And we're going to now invite her to come and speak to us on Article 8 of the special town meeting, coming to you live on Thursday, August 13. And we have 6 town meeting members. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening.
Okay, I'm really against this article at this time too, even though I don't like to see the fire trucks roar past my house going downhill. But I think that I went up to the site, and it's a very bad site. It's part of the town forest. It's behind the skating rink. I took a look at it. It's near exit 5 where the hospital ambulances have to get off the highway. There's too much going on at exit 5. It's really the location as much as that hasn't been considered. Just because we own a little bit of land there doesn't mean that that's a good location to build it. I'd love to see the fire station move to a better spot, possibly combined with the police headquarters that needs to be redone. It's in a terrible place too. So, but that area, to have any more traffic there, this plan hasn't been considered very well. So I'm certainly against it right now, but maybe in the future when it's better thought out. Is that okay?
Thank you.
So it's a no from me.
Thank you.
And that's one of the reasons I showed up tonight after checking out the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean Patnode Lane. She's with Precinct 4, and she's joining us from Plymouth North High School. Precinct 5, Wrestling Brewster, is to be followed by Precinct 8, Joseph Paul Cunningham. Mr. Brewster, good evening.
Good evening, Wrestling Brewster, Precinct 5. I urge our town meeting members to really look at this article, and I think that a lot of town meeting members say they have not got enough information. And if you don't have enough information, then you need to demand more information before you pass anything. I think it's not the right time, and I think it's not the right place. I think that Ron Reilly had some great ideas about separating the two, the offices and the station, and it's just not the right time right now to spend $30 million. And I really it's nothing against the firemen or, we need to look at this economically. And I just think that I've heard a lot of town meeting members say they do not have enough information. And if you don't have enough information about an article, you should never pass, especially when it's this much. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion to close debate. We're going to go to that. Precinct 3, Andrew James Lorette moves to close debate. You'll see the screen. He will remove his name, and you'll see now the speaker's queue of people who want to speak either for the first time or again. And at this time, we're going to call up on the motion to close debate on the motion to amend. This is a closing debate on the motion to amend. When you see it on the screen, it's there. We're going to begin voting now. It'll be 45 seconds. Please vote on whether to close debate on the motion to amend. Once we complete the voting on this, if the motion passes, we'll vote on the motion to amend. If it fails, we'll continue to debate on the motion to amend and the main motion. This is Plymouth Town Meeting. It's coming to you live this evening on Thursday, August 13. We began at 6 p.m. Under our charter, we will continue up to 2 hours, and then we'll take a recess. And town meeting members have been in session debating Article 8. You'll see that the timer goes down. Town meeting members are voting with a V-voting system. And this is a procedural vote. We're now going to look at the totals on the vote. 91 say yes, 27 say no. We're through debating the motion to amend. We're now going to go on Mr. Savan's motion to amend Special Town Meeting Article 8. We're going to call that up on the screen. I read it a short time ago, and we're going to vote on whether or not to approve that, and the voting will start now on the motion. And you'll see again, town meeting members have 45 seconds in which to vote on this motion to amend offered by Peter Savan. Town meeting members have the text of this motion. They've been provided a motion book. They've received updates with amendments. We've received a great number of motions from town meeting members, and we've endeavored to provide that information on a regular basis to town meeting members as they prepare for town meeting. We're going to continue after this, and at this point, I'd like to say that the voting is counting down, and you're now going to have a vote, and you're going to see the vote. On the motion, 46 say yes, 66 say no, 4 abstentions. Let's roll the precincts. We're going to begin with precincts 1, 2, and 3. You're going to see how your town meeting members are voting on the motion to amend. It was a majority vote for the quantum of vote, and it did not pass. We're scrolling through precincts 4, 5, and 6. We have 15 precincts. We'll scroll through all of them, and then we'll continue to debate the main motion. It's not been amended, and we'll continue the debate until all speakers have spoken or until we have a motion to close debate. We're now on precincts 7, 8, and 9. You see us scrolling through the precincts. This is a substantive vote on whether to amend substantively the main motion on Article 8. 10, 11, and 12 are being shown. The green are yes, the red are no, and you'll see an abstention here, and that's in yellow. Again, the motion fails, and we're now going to go back to debate on the main motion, and we're going to invite Paul Cunningham, who wishes to speak on the main motion. Good evening, Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. And we're talking about the Motion 8, which is no longer a $30 million fire station. It's a $53 million one, thanks to Mr. Neely. And this should be located on a large piece of land near where the growth is going to be over the next 25 years. We're building a 50-year building, which I know we have never been done before, but that's what we're doing. And possibly room to collocate with the police department. And you don't locate a major building because the land is cheap. We learned in preparation for this meeting that the land was put up for sale 3 times and had no buyers. This is not a gem of a location. I took 2 days to analyze what is in that small stretch. Went down to each one of the roads, the egress is on it. There's 99 businesses there, 8 restaurants, 3 gas stations, a major post office, a medical building, a 120-room inn, major retail like HD and BJ's, shopping outlets, the police headquarters, the police jail, the sheriff's department, our largest employer, the hospital, the court system, doctor's office, and trucking for the town wastewater and highway department before we put the 320 approved 2-bedroom apartments. All heavy traffic business, not just at commute times, but throughout the day. And I did further on look at it, and these fire trucks with their frozen lights, which is now I know is an octagon system, coming out of the station, and they'd like to go downtown. They're going through 4 sets of lights. Going going north is 3 sets, and going west is just 1 set. But these freezing all of these, there is no room on the road for the people to get out of the way. They can ring the siren all they want. So this in midweek, returning to the station is just as bad. If they're coming from the north to exit 5, most people have noticed it backs up onto Route 3 on a Tuesday morning, a Wednesday morning. So it's going to be in constant gridlock with equipment trying to get to a fire, more important, returning to the station. So station sites should have been selected years ago, but now let's look at it where we know we're going to have a big growth and find a big spot for it. Plenty of room to expand. We're not under the gun of a grant expiration. So whatever the land cost, it's a fraction of the building cost. Vote no on this article. Let's start search for a proper location with the town's future growth in mind. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. We're going to a point of order from Cindy Balonis. She's in Precinct 12. She'll be followed by Precinct 4, John Hammond. Cindy Balonis, good evening, and your point of order?
My vote was not counted on Peter Spahn's amendment. I voted no.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
John Hammond, Precinct 4. Good evening.
Good evening. I too think that both the financial uncertainty and the the lack of depth in the proposal and the location are all reasons to vote against it. I also have a question about borrowing. In a previous article, talks about using a previous authorization to borrow for the salt shed for a new project. And I don't understand any advantage in going back and saying, well, we said we'd borrow that then, so it's okay to do it now. It won't really be borrowing as much. So could somebody answer that question for me? Thank you.
The question of borrowing will go to Lynn Barrett. She is the Director of Finance for the town of Plymouth. And Lynn Barrett, do you care to respond to a question from Precinct 4 Town Meeting Member? Good evening. Lynn Barrett.
I think his question had to do with using the funding source of the salt shed towards the $3 million for the fire station renovations. And the reason why we're doing that is it's a project that basically has been abandoned, but we had already borrowed for it. So we cannot just leave that money sitting. So we need to use it for a similar type project, which is another building project, and that's why we're using it towards that project.
Thank you. That was Lynn Barrett, Director of Finance. And at this time, we're going to go to Precinct 10, Peter Neville. He moves to, actually we have 2 motions to close debate, but this would be on the main motion. Let's show the queue. Let's take off Mr. Votrain and Mr. Neville since they're not looking to speak. Stacy Delacruz did have a point of order. I'm going to go to Stacy before we take the vote on whether to close debate on the main motion. Precinct 10, Stacy Delacruz, your point of order. Good evening.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, this is Stacy Delacruz, Precinct 10. I just wanted to let you guys know that I tried to vote yes for the motion to amend, and it wasn't accepting my vote.
Okay, we got it. It's all set.
You got
Thank
it. Good,
you.
thanks.
Yeah. So now we're going to go on whether to close debate. You've seen the queue, and we have one more point of order. We'll take that first. Don Williams, Precinct 8. What is your point of order? And good evening once again. Don Williams, Precinct 8.
I voted yes on that motion by Peter Neville, and I wasn't recorded either.
There's no motion, I mean, we haven't voted on Peter Neville's motion to close debate.
No, I mean, Swan's,
And you,
Mr. Swan's motion.
And again, how did you vote?
I voted yes.
You voted yes. Thank you. Okay.
Sorry.
And now we're going to go on the motion to close debate on the main motion on Article 8. When you see it, you will then be voting whether to close debate. This is a 2/3 vote, and you can start voting now. This is whether to close debate on Article 8 in the special town meeting warrant. If we close debate, we will move on to voting on Article 8, which also requires a 2/3 vote since there's borrowing involved. Town meeting members are voting. They determine whether to limit debate on the floor of town meeting. And currently, we had 2 motions to do that, and we're counting down the time. People are using a V-voter platform. A few people have called in when their vote didn't get counted through the display. We're now going to finish the voting on this procedural motion. 83 voting in favor, 37 in opposition. The motion carries by more than 2/3. We will now go to the main motion. And we don't display the procedural votes unless they're close. We will, however, display the next vote, which is the main motion. It's a substantive motion. Article 8, if you call it up on the screen when we see it, we're going to begin voting. It's going to be a 2/3 vote, and it has to do with the fire station and whether or not we're going to approve. Here you see motion number 8. You can start your voting now. This is on Article 8 in the special town meeting warrant. When we complete this vote, we'll be moving on. And we'll be moving on to Article 4A2 because we changed the order of articles at the start of the special town meeting. And so we'll be going to that next following this. But currently town meeting members are taking a vote on a $30 million motion for a new fire station to be located on Long Pond Road. Town meeting members are voting with a V-voter platform. They have 45 seconds this evening in which to complete their voting. We're counting down, and in a moment you're going to see the totals, and then we're going to go through each precinct. 14 in favor, 109 no, 0 abstentions. The motion does not carry. We're going to go through the precincts. We're going to take off everybody on the queue who wanted to speak since we've closed that. And I then see that Mr. Neville has another procedural motion that he would like to make. And so once we go through, we will call on Mr. Neville. But currently, this is the recording of the votes, precincts 4, 5, and 6. And we're displaying the precincts so town meeting members can see how they were voting. Again, on the screen, we're going to be showing we have no speakers in the queue. We do have a procedural motion that we'll take up once we go through. And as we're displaying, let's bring in Precinct 10, Peter Neville now, and we'll listen to Mr. Neville. Good evening, Peter Neville.
Thank you, Steve. Peter Neville, Precinct 10. I just don't have new math at my fingertips. And so when I'm looking at a 2/3 vote or 66%, it would be just so wonderful if I knew what was the winning number. 66% of 123. What number are we looking for, Steve?
It's a number based not on the 123 because we don't count the abstentions. You look at the total yeses and nos and you compare them. And if there are 2/3 yeses compared to the nos or vice versa, well, it has to be yeses in order to extend the debate. But all I can tell you is I've done the math, and up until now, I've done it in my head, and I think it's okay. But please correct me if I'm wrong. We're going to go to another point of order, Precinct 2, Richard Sirrico. Good evening, Richard Sirrico.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. My point of order is merely that by looking at the yeas and nays on the vote on Article 8, I saw that at least one of the persons who voted is a firefighter in the town of Plymouth. And I would like the town meeting membership to know that people are not observing the need to abstain when
Mr.
they have a
Sirrico, that's
conflict
not
of
a
interest.
point of order. I mean, you can make that argument on a motion, but that's not really a point of order in terms of procedure. Thank you. We're going to move on to Article 4A2. Mr. Canty moves the town appropriates the sum of $500,000 to pay costs associated with the Public Safety Communication Tower Capital Project, as shown below, including all costs incidental or related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, $259,840 be transferred from free cash and $240,160 from insurance recovery over $150,000. Kevin Canty is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. It's a majority vote. Mr. Canty on the motion.
In a unanimous vote of 12-0 with no abstentions, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this component of Article 4. Approval of this component will authorize the town to appropriate $500,000 for the construction of a new fire department communications tower and installation of the communication systems thereupon. $259,840 of the $500,000 will come from free cash, while the remaining $240,160 will come from insurance recovery proceeds.
Thank you. We're going to go to Precinct 3, Margaret Cohan. She has a point of order. Good evening, Ms. Cohan. Welcome.
Hello, moderator. I hope I made the right request, but on Article 8, my vote was not recorded.
And what was your vote?
It was no.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to continue with Precinct 10, Alan Costello. Mr. Costello, we're debating Article 4A2. Good evening again. Please give.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, town meeting members. I want to thank you Monday night for voting to change the order of this article. I felt that this article is closely related to the motion that we just voted on. And for the same reasons, I felt that this article was not ready for approval. I don't think it's the right time financially to do a project like this. And secondly, and most importantly, it's not the right location. And to have this communication tower be built for both the fire department, other public safety units, and to co-locate cellular carriers or rental income tenants, this is just not the right location. I hope now that the motion 8 has failed, the town will look to relocate a new fire station. And on this piece of property, communications tower could be installed that fulfilled all the needs of the fire department, police, and EMS. This proposal to put it at the Camelot Park location is destined to be a financial loser for the taxpayer. Because of the close proximity of other towers, the police station, number 1, in the county tower on the opposite side of the Camelot Plaza, makes it very undesirable for tenants that are going to come in and pay rental income monies back to the town. So I think in the interim, while we wait to find a new location for a fire station, if the communications for the fire department are really in dire need, they can place an antenna and or equipment on the existing police tower. To put a tower up at the proposed location is just a bad idea at this time for all of the reasons that we went over for motion 8. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to go to Precinct 15, Richard Neely, since he has a motion to amend. Mr. Neely, what is your motion to amend? Good evening once again.
Yes, thank you. I believe that the asbestos management plan should stand by itself. It is important to consider the safety of town employees, especially with any exposure to asbestos. Therefore, I move that the asbestos management plan amount of $80,000 be considered in a separate motion.
I'm going to have to hold that for a moment and have that reviewed by town council. We're going to compare what's in the warrant or the warning to the public to see whether or not that's appropriate, since that is not broken out in Mr. Chianti's main motion that is coming before us. But in the meantime, I have a point of order from Alan Costello, Precinct 10. Mr. Costello.
Mr. Moderator, I believe we, for a motions meeting a month ago, we cut that article into two. We separated it already, and I believe we voted on the asbestos on Monday evening.
Yes, I've been told that, yes, that was Article 4A1. We did vote that on Monday evening. Perhaps Mr. Neely, that's a question, but so you're.
I just want to make sure that it hasn't muddied the waters on my presentation. I'm only speaking about the communications.
Mr. Costello,
tower.
thank you. Your point of order is over. We're going to go to Charles Votrain, Precinct 4 was a point of order. Mr. Votrain.
Can you hear me, Mr. Moderator?
Yes, we can. Good evening.
Mr. Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I actually you got the answer already. I know the vote was 120 to 2.
Thank you. Okay, we're now going to go to Francis O'Brien, who moves to close debate. So it's a motion to close debate. We're going to show the speaker's queue. We're going to remove Mr. O'Brien from the list. You'll see the speaker's queue, and now we're going to have call up on the screen on a motion to close debate. It'll be a procedural motion, and town meeting members again will have 45 seconds in which to vote to close debate. This is on Article 4A2. It's now in front of you, and we're going to begin voting now. This is on whether to close debate on Article 4A2. This is Plymouth Special Town Meeting. It is coming to you live. If the motion does not carry by 2/3, we'll continue to debate Article 4A2. If it does carry, we'll go right to the main motion from the Advisory and Finance Committee. Town meeting members have been continuing in the special town meeting warrant this evening, and we picked up where we left off on our first session on Monday evening. You'll see the time is counting down, and we're on Article 4A2. Town meeting members are using a V-voter platform. That completes the voting. You'll now see the total. It is exactly 2/3, Mr. Neville. 80 to 40. That's my math. It passes. We're now going to go to the main motion, Article 4A2. And we're going to have that motion show up on the screen. And once it does, we're then going to be voting. There it is. And we're going to have 45 seconds starting now. Town meeting members have voted to close debate. So we're going to move on the screen. We're done with the debate on this article. And we're going to continue after this with the special town meeting warrant. And I'll be announcing to you, I did get a question about whether or not Mr. Neely's motion was a motion to reconsider. It was not. It was rather to make it separate, but we determined that it was voted last week or earlier this week on Monday. It was not a motion to reconsider that. So just to clarify, the voting is counting down. You're going to see how everybody voted after we get 49 in favor, 72 in opposition, 1 abstention. The motion does not carry. And as we look at the screen of town meeting members, I do want to announce that 9A was voted on the consent motion earlier on Monday. 9B is no action. No motion, no action. 9C was voted on the consent. 9D was voted on the consent article. Article 10 is no motion, no action. Article 11, no motion, no action. Article 12 in the special town meeting warrant was in the consent article. Article 13 was in the consent article. And Article 14 was in the consent article. And following the showing and display of all the precincts, we'll be voting on Mr. Canty's motion to dissolve. And it will be a roll call vote on whether to dissolve the Plymouth Special Town Meeting. So this would be a motion to end the special town meeting and begin the annual town meeting. You've seen all the precincts, and now we're going to go to the motion to dissolve. And the motion to dissolve is to end the special town meeting. And so when you see that, you're then going to have 45 seconds in which to vote. But before we do that, I have a point of order from Precinct 13, Daniel Gorsica. Mr. Gorsica, your point of order. Good evening. Precinct 13, Daniel Gorsica.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Moderator, I just have a question. The consent agenda and I'm ashamed to say if we voted on it already, but did we vote on the consent agenda already?
Yes,
for
we
the
did.
Special town meeting?
Yes, we did, Mr. Gorsica. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Precinct 7, Nathan Siegel, your point of order. Nathan Siegel.
Hi, thanks, Mr. Moderator. Request from you, if there was ever any future votes that were exact ties, that were procedural motions, would you be able to please scroll through just in case someone's vote wasn't received? It would actually affect the outcome. Thank you.
Again, it wasn't close, and it was a procedural motion. It wasn't a substantive motion. At this time, we're going to take the motion to dissolve. Mr. Canty moves to dissolve the Plymouth Special Town Meeting. And if we can show that to vote. And now you see it on the screen, and you can begin voting now. This is to dissolve the Plymouth Special Town Meeting. This is coming to you live on Thursday, August 13. A few of us are here in the studio at PAC TV. I'm joined by Assistant Moderator Nicole Manfredi. She is heading up the technology. Mark Rich is the Town Council for the Town of Plymouth. Also, we're in studio with the Executive Director for PAC TV, and also we have two representatives from OTI Technology. You can see on the screen, this is a good-sized studio. We're more than 6 feet apart, and we are grateful to provide and bring you this virtual town meeting. The voting is going to end now, and the vote is 118 in favor, 0 voted no, 0 abstentions. So we're not going to show the vote. It's unanimous. And the Plymouth Special Town Meeting is dissolved at 7:28 p.m. And now, if there are no objections, Mr. Canty moves to reopen the annual town meeting. And Article 1, we have no motion, we have no action. Article 2 was considered and voted in the consent agenda. Article 3 was voted in the consent agenda. Article 4 voted in the consent agenda. Article 5, no motion, no action. Article 6 was in the consent agenda. We now move to Article 7 in the annual town meeting. And you'll see that we have motions from Mr. Canty. And I've been, first, before we begin with the motions, we're going to have receive a talk from the Director of Finance, Lynn Barrett. Since we are talking about the budget, we're going to go to her first, and she's going to speak, and then we're going to go to Mr. Canty since he has multiple motions before you. So Lynn Barrett is the Director of Finance. Good evening once again, Lynn Barrett.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. We talked about it last week at the town meeting preview, but there were not a lot of town meeting members there, so I just wanted to mention it again. It was asked, the question was asked with regards to what would the effect of the level funded state aid have on the budget that we're voting this evening with all of the estimated revenues and expenditures that you're voting. So I just wanted to bring your attention to just an update to the supplemental book, supplemental one that was mailed to town meeting members probably about 4 weeks ago now. There's on page 18 and 19 is a sources and uses page. And that page actually was created and sent to town meeting members prior to the level funding of state aid. So the result of level funding the state aid has now decreased the amount that we're using of the excess levy capacity, which then in turn would decrease the amount of taxes that we need to raise because we're getting the money from state aid. So the estimated increase based on this budget that you're voting tonight to the tax rate would be approximately 54 cents per thousand. So for the average home in Plymouth, which according to the 2020 assessed values, the average home in Plymouth is approximately $373,000. So that average home would see an increase of about $201 for the fiscal year. Now, as I said in the budget presentation, we still have fall town meeting. We still are closing the books and looking at any other revenue sources that we might have. This is still just an estimate, but that's what it looks like right now. And that is based on the 2020 assessed values. So I just level funded the assessed values from 2020 into 21, but most likely the assessed values are going to increase. And I base that on that the sales have increased in Plymouth, the dollar value of sales have increased. So assessed values are always based on sales, actual sales. So if our values increase about 5%, which the previous year they increased over 6%, then that increase in the tax rate will actually go down. But I just wanted to make that comment, and if there are any questions, I'm here to answer any questions regarding the budget tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Canty moves the town vote to appropriate $13,406,926 items 1 through 13 as detailed in the Advisory and Finance Subcommittee Report A. We're going to go through the different subcommittee reports and vote each of them individually. Kevin Canty, you are the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Please speak on your motion.
The Advisory and Finance Committee reconsidered and amended its original recommendations on the entire budget at its July 8th, 2020 meeting. The committee's amended recommendations for the fiscal year 21 budget contain significant net reductions to our previous pre-pandemic budgetary recommendations. These amended recommendations were made in anticipation of financial difficulties as a result of the still ongoing and ever dynamic pandemic and its economic impacts. It is anticipated future adjustments to the fiscal year 21 budget may be necessary, or at least prudent, once we have more hard data on how the pandemic and the economic difficulties associated with it are actually affecting town revenues, as opposed to the estimations and projections we must rely on for now. And both the committee and town management will be keeping a close eye on the situation as it develops over the course of the fiscal year as part of that process. These amended recommendations were based on the best projections available at the time, and they remain the best advice that the committee can give to town meeting now. The committee's amended recommendations were voted according to budget subcommittees, as we have been doing with the budget for the past few years. This first motion, 7A1, deals with the area of the budget contained in Budget Subcommittee A's section of the budget. Accordingly, in a unanimous vote of 14-0 with no abstentions, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this section of the budget, incorporating a net decrease of $201,198 from the committee's original budget recommendation for this section of the budget.
Thank you, Kevin Canty, Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1, moves to amend that the town reduce item 2, town manager, all other expenses, art and history collection by $5,000. A motion to amend is a majority vote. Everett Malaguti, on your motion to amend. Good evening.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. My act for actually reducing this item within subset of Section A was because it deals with the restoration and preservation of historical items within Town Hall. My belief is that any money to restore historical items is the intent of the CPC Act and the CPC Community Preservation Committee that we pay into as a surtax on our tax bills. While this may be a small amount of money, I believe that we should not be double taxing the taxpayers on items that were already are already used for CPC money and not use actual tax dollars to pay for the same exact items. I hope town meeting reduces this. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's Everett Malaguti on the motion to amend. We have the motion to amend on the floor. Town meeting members will be able to speak to the motion to amend as well as the main motion. The first vote will be on the motion to amend. We're going to go to Precinct 8, George McKay, to be followed by Precinct 8, Tess Brennan. Good evening, Mr. McKay. Welcome to town meeting. George McKay is Precinct 8.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Moderator and fellow town meeting members. I think Mr. Canty said the conclusion of what I wanted to say when he said, we're not sure where we are, and we ought to take another look at where we are in the future. But let me just read some prepared remarks here. And, you know, we're in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, and the previous budget analysis we should consider as outdated. And we should vote no on all of Article 7, allow a couple weeks to go by, and operate in the 1/12 budget. You know, Massachusetts has a 17% unemployment rate, and it's the highest in the nation. And Plymouth's largest industry, the tourist industry, is at an all-time low. People are really struggling to pay their taxes in Plymouth. Increasing a budget over last year's budget is not acceptable. We had some experience recently operating during a pandemic, and it looks like this pandemic is going to be with us for a while. I think we should take a couple of weeks between now and the fall town meeting and see where we really are related to our revenues and our expenses. And in the meantime, operate the way we've been operating on the 1/12 rule for 2 more months. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
We're going to go to Precinct 8, Tess Brennan. Tess, good evening.
Hello, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening.
Good evening. Some of what I have to say will be a little redundant. I agree with George. Like many people in town meeting, I really struggled with this budget. I think town meeting really needs to appreciate just how much COVID has wrecked our economies in ways we're only really beginning to understand. State aid provides 15% of our revenue. Our legislative caucus last week warned us to expect significantly reduced state aid going forward, as half the state's revenues come from sales tax, which they've been unable to collect. The legislative reps have urged us to be conservative in considering our budget. Our town receipts are 10% of our revenue, but town's been closed since March. And if I'm reading the budget correctly, our receipts were down $2.4 million for the last 3.5 months of the 2020 budget. The taxes, our biggest source of revenue, are 75% of our revenue. But as George mentioned, the tourism industry has been one of the hardest hit industries by COVID, and it's our biggest industry. The federal Paycheck Protection Program ended last week, I believe. That's a program that gives small businesses money so that they can retain their employees. That's gone. We don't know how that will affect many of the small businesses in town and all over the South Shore for that matter. 55 million people have filed for unemployment since March. And though there have been many rehires, there were still 30 million people on unemployment as of last week. Nationally, there's a 10% unemployment rate. Massachusetts, as a couple of people have noted, has a 17% unemployment rate. I'm not usually henny pennyish about these things, but I think the sky might be falling just a little bit. And the town meeting should be very careful about how it chooses to spend the town's money, or we will not have any choice going forward. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, town meeting.
Cohen, he's a town meeting member, and he's also the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. I believe that speaks to Mr. Malaguti's motion to amend. Mr. Cohen, good evening.
Yes, Steve. Bill Cohen, Precinct 3. I was speaking on Mr. Malaguti's motion. I think it's important to understand that the Community Preservation Act is governed by a Mass General Law. It is determined by an application process. Each application is taken individually. If we were just to earmark all of the historical activities of the town, just to say that that will be done by the CPA and the application process will be disregarded, you are really connected. You are creating what he's saying, a tax on a tax. So if he didn't have the Community Preservation Act, the town would still have to take care of these documents. They've owned some of these documents nearly 400 years. Obviously, if an application is filed, we'll take it on a case-by-case basis. But to just determine that all of the art collection will be cared for by CPA funds would interrupt the application process that we have that is governed by Mass General Law. So I'd ask the town meeting members not to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Going to Precinct 15, Michael Hanlon. We're debating the Subcommittee Report 7A, and we have a motion to amend. Mr. Hanlon, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm good. Thank you.
You're all set. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm all set. I do not have any comments.
Okay. Next, we're going to go to Gerald Sirrico, Precinct 3. Mr. Sirrico. Good evening again. Mr. Sirrico is joining us by phone.
Yes, Steve. Can you hear me, Steve?
We can.
Okay, Steve. Good thing I'm not in jail trying to get out and get a hold of you. I'd never get the hell out. I got a question maybe for Lynn Barrett. Two or three questions. I'd like to know. Mark, turn it down, Mark. I'd like to know how the receipts for the meals tax are going, or if the taxpayer is going to be paying for the town hall. That's number one. Number two, I'd like to know how the Symes house is going. And number three, if she knows anything about that, and I'd like to know about the crematory. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and if I call you again, I may be in jail.
Okay, I'm not sure if these are all related to the Subcommittee Report A, but we'll go to the Director of Finance because they all probably have an impact on Article 7 overall. Lynn Barrett's Director of Finance.
Thank you, Moderator. So as far as the meals tax up through the third quarter of fiscal 20 came in very strongly. And then obviously COVID hit. So we had expected the fourth quarter to probably take in, we received about 50% of what we had expected to come in, is what came in. And using that number, and then since then, restaurants have opened up and more has been happening versus that quarter. So what I've done is I've estimated out using my, estimate spreadsheet that I have, I'm being very conservative in using that 50% number going forward for the next 4 quarters. So in doing that, we have enough money in the meals tax fund to pay for town hall for fiscal 21. And with those estimates, we would have enough to pay for the principal and interest on town hall going forward, based on sort of a normalcy coming back after a year from now. But those obviously will get adjusted every time a quarter comes in. But I don't think that we're going to have an effect on this budget with regards to the meals tax. The second item you mentioned was the Signs House, and that has absolutely no effect on this budget whatsoever. And I actually wouldn't necessarily be able to answer that question, but I don't think it pertains to this article. And then thirdly, the crematory, we've actually seen an increase in the crematory activity this past fiscal year, especially in the fourth quarter. So it seems to be an uptick. So.
That is Director of Finance Lynn Barrett. We're going to go to Precinct 5, Patricia McCarthy, followed by Precinct 3, Donna Curtin. Patricia McCarthy, proceed.
Yes, Steve. Regarding, I guess, Article 7, when the comments were made about all of Article 7, and I think that the warrant for fall town meeting closes, I thought it was tomorrow, maybe it's a week from tomorrow. And I know that from what Kevin Canty has said, that we may have to make some adjustments in fall town meeting to our budget based on what we know at that point. However, I really feel it's now is the time to set our budget with what we know of now. And I don't remember what Lynn said about how long you can go with these 1/12 budgets, but I know many of the departments, and I know especially the school department, is very concerned about setting their budget for the annual budget as an annual budget. So those are kind of my comments with a question thrown in about the fall town meeting and the 1/12 situation. Thank you.
And I believe the warrant does close tomorrow, Patricia McCarthy. We were told that earlier with respect to the warrant. Donna Curtin, Precinct 3.
Hi, Mr. Moderator. Just a very quick comment on Mr. Malaguti's motion to amend about the Town Art and History Committee request. I don't believe that's actually for preservation work, which would be eligible for funding under the CPC. I think it's more in the way of a working budget for that group of people to do things such as they've done in the past, like put things on display, hang artwork, take care of minor problems and that sort of thing. Some of the larger needs do go to CPC, as we saw with the article to allow for the restoration of the 2 maps. So it's more an equipment and supply thing, and sometimes for artworks, those things are expensive. It is a modest budget, but I certainly understand the tone of town meeting and would just like to add a thank you to town meeting member Therese Brennan for her very thoughtful comments about the decisions we face tonight. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Precinct 7, Thomas Bagley. We're continuing to debate Article 7A. Mr. Bagley. Good evening. Welcome.
Hi, Mr. Moderator. Thank you. Just had a quick question, actually, on Mr. Malaguti's motion. I was just wondering what is the plan for this $5,000? I noticed, when we look at the budget report, that this line wasn't funded in the last 2 budget cycles, whereas the rest of the town managers' office's lines were fairly level funded for the last few years, and this seems to be an additional amount added. So just curious if anybody can answer the question about why it's added this year and what the plans might be and what kind of projects it is going towards.
Town manager responding to Thomas Bagley question on the plans. Good evening, Melissa Arrighi. She's our town manager.
Thank you very much. We have provided this committee that is working with us on art displays the ability to have some funding for some of these projects. And I'll give you an example. We had to secure much of the artwork in this building when we initially hung it. And if you've been in prior to us closing to the public, you saw that on the walls. Well, there was an additional expense to some of that, and we needed to secure it. There were too many things that that were not accounted for at 11 Lincoln Street that left the building that we never had returned. So we do feel it's important to have some funding available for us to do things in this building, including securing work that secure artwork that we bring in.
Precinct 10, Brendan Brady. We're debating Article 7A. Mr. Brady, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Thank you. I don't think that anyone will argue the crisis that the economy is in right now. And I appreciate FinCom taking the time to go back through and reassess these operating budgets. I think as a town, though, we should be trying to get these operating budgets pushed forward because labor is the #1 cost for any business. And if we want to support getting people back to work, we need to support these operating budgets. We already received word, thanks to the town manager's report, that the state is level funding this year. So I think that we have an economic crisis, but it's maybe not as severe. Certainly, we are going to have to probably reassess things as we have more information, just as we are doing with the firehouse. But if we want to try to pad our accounts, we should be looking at capital projects and getting as many people back to work in this town as we possibly can. So we should be supporting these operating budgets. Thank you.
Precinct 10, Peter Neville moves to close debate. It's a 2/3 vote. It's not debatable. We're going to show the speaker's queue. We'll remove Mr. Howe from that and Mr. Brady. You'll see the speaker's queue. We're now going to vote on whether to close debate on Mr. Malaguti's motion to amend. When you see it on the screen, you'll have 45 seconds in which to vote. The vote is there. We're looking at the time and voting now. And you'll see it, the time will count down. And town meeting, once we vote on this, if we close debate, we would be then voting on the motion to amend. And once we have voted on that, then we would go back to debate on the main motion, unless we have a motion to close debate. We'll be continuing till about 8 o'clock, and then we'll be taking a recess, which is required. It'll be a short 5-minute recess. And during the recess, we're going to be bringing to you a presentation video on a future town meeting article. And I see that the voting froze on the screen. 45 seconds. And we have 45 seconds completed. Thank you very much. Now we're going to show the total: 105 in favor, 15 in opposition, and 0 abstentions. The motion carries overwhelmingly, more than 2/3. We're now going to vote on Mr. Malaguti's motion. And so we're going to show that on the screen, and we're going to show the timer, and we're going to try it again. And but OTI is also keeping track. And as soon as we show the vote that they're voting on, we'll then run the timer. So this is going to be a vote on, there we go. No, it's going to be 7A. So let's change that. I'm just going to cancel this vote on the screen, because we're voting on, we're going to be voting on the 7A. And OTI is going to bring that up on the screen. And then PAC TV will do the timer. Town meeting members are in the middle of the warrant now for the annual town meeting. And they're going to be voting on the motion to amend, motion to amend, there we go. Now we're going to vote, and we can start voting now. This is Mr. Malaguti's motion to amend Subcommittee Report A on 7A. It's a motion to amend. Town meeting members are voting. The timer is clicking, and we will continue after this with the main motion either amended or not, depending on the results of this motion to amend. We will display the precincts. This is a substantive part of it, even though it's to amend, it is amending substantively, and we will show and display the precincts. The voting will end shortly, and town meeting members have an opportunity to see their vote and see the total. So first on the motion to amend, 36 in favor, 85 in opposition, 1 abstention. Motion does not carry. We'll scroll through the precincts, and then we will go back to the main motion. It's not been amended, and we'll continue to debate it until we have a motion to close debate. You'll see precincts 1, 2, and 3 have voted on the motion to amend, and we're going to scroll through all 15 precincts. Precincts 4, 5, and 6. We're continuing to go through the precincts of the special town meeting, the annual town meeting, I'm sorry. We've dissolved the special town meeting. This is coming to you live on August 13th. Town meeting members are in the first part of their second session, and town meeting will continue. We have precincts 10, 11, and 12. And finally, we're going to show here precincts 13, 14, and 15. And with that, we're going to go to Peter Neville, who wants to speak on the main motion. Mr. Neville. He's with precinct 10.
Steve. I just have a question regarding what looks to me, when I look at the details on the subcommittee report A, it strikes me that there's about $152,000 appropriated in this section for Medicare Part B penalties within the human resources, the schools, and member benefits, those 3 categories. And I just need help understanding why the town would commit to paying a penalty for Part B, when it's my understanding that if people had to make a choice not to enroll in Part B, and that choice brought with it a penalty. I guess the inverse would be, would town employees like us to enroll them automatically in Part B? So I just need some help with understanding why 151,000, and that's not going to go away unless, maybe it will, but the penalty is there. Once you've failed to make that election, then you pay a penalty for all of your Part B. That would be my first question. Then the second question would be why we aren't using a Medicare Advantage plan for everyone over 65. But let's take the first one. Let's not get it complicated. 151,000.
Thank you.
Just need a rationale.
We'll go for the first question. We'll go to Lynn Barrett, Director of Finance. Lynn Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So, Mr. Neville, you're correct in what you're saying. However, in cities and towns in Massachusetts, many years ago, it was not required for retirees to enroll in Medicare under Chapter 32. But now they have to. So in 2011, I believe now it's required that you have to. But the town actually voted, I believe it was back in 2004, some changes to health insurance. And at the time, retirees agreed to enroll into Medicare. So prior to 2004, we have many retirees who had not rolled into Medicare, and we are required by law to pay for that penalty. And so that penalty will expire as these people roll off of those plans. So it will reduce. The only time it increases is when the Medicare Part B premium increases. But overall, this particular budget on the penalty has decreased year over year. Okay.
Thank you. It being 8 p.m., this special annual town meeting stands in recess for 5 minutes. Please enjoy the video for an upcoming article.
Hello, I'm Dory Stoley, Vice Chair of the Open Space Committee, with a 3-minute presentation on Article 24. One of the responsibilities of the Open Space Committee is to review land parcels that have been forfeited to the town due to non-payment of taxes. These are referred to as tax title properties, and there are hundreds of them, including the 8.45-acre Peter Road property in yellow, which is located in West Plymouth near the Carver line, and which we recommend be transferred to the care and custody of the Conservation Commission. Please note the 3 green polygons. In prior town meetings, these former tax title properties totaling 22 acres were voted to be transferred to the Conservation Commission. The Peter Road parcel abuts one of these properties. Of special note is that all of these areas were originally designated as open space by the developer Ravenbrook Realty in its plans for the David Estates development. The Open Space Committee assesses promising tax title properties throughout Plymouth using standardized assessment criteria, ensuring we examine critical factors affecting the quality and utility of each parcel. For instance, we look at aquifer and surface water protection, potential for human recreation, occurrence of rare plants and animals, and climate change resiliency, to name a few. The Peter Road parcel is recommended for protection for 4 main reasons. 1. It was originally designated as open space. 2. This forested parcel has great value for climate change resiliency, acting to cool the area, thus countering the heat island effect of buildings, parking lots, and roads. It also sequesters carbon. 3. Because it is adjacent to one protected open space parcel and near 2 others, its value for wildlife is greater because animals are able to move between protected areas. 4. It provides neighborhood open space for people to enjoy, supporting the committee's goal of providing natural open space throughout Plymouth so that all residents have open space close to their homes. COVID-19 has shown us how important this is for physical exercise and mental health. Based on these factors, the Open Space Committee considers this property an excellent candidate for town open space. At the first virtual meeting of the West Plymouth Steering Committee, to which abutting property owners were invited, 5 individuals spoke in favor of the article and no one spoke against it. The Select Board, Advisory and Finance Committee, and Conservation Commission all support Article 24. We urge you to vote yes for Article 24. Thank you.
How will I know when the 5 minutes is up? Just cable casting this town meeting live on Comcast 15, Verizon 47, on PAC TV's streaming channel, pactv.org/live. We'd like to thank Julie Thompson, Mark McKinley, Brooke Hoffman, and the entire PAC TV team. Also like to thank Assistant Moderator Nicole Manfredi, her team of professionals, for the behind-the-scene organization of this virtual town meeting. And this evening, once again, Plymouth North High School has been provided by the Plymouth School District for our use as a remote location for town meeting in-person technical support. And we thank Dr. Maestas, the Plymouth School Committee, and the Plymouth Public Schools for their generous contribution to this virtual town meeting. And at this time, we're going to continue where we left off. We were in Article 7 of the annual town meeting, and we were in 7A, and we were Debating that, we have speakers in the queue. We're going to go to Precinct 8, Geraldine Williams. Good evening, Ms. Williams. We're on Subcommittee Report A.
Hello, Geraldine Williams, Precinct 8. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'm just trying to address my fellow town meeting members about the fact that I feel this whole budget need is more than our taxpayers can afford. I looked at what Miss Arrighi had sent out in her report on Monday, the town manager's report. And there was a series of taxes, a report on our taxes that were not paid as of June 30th for the past fiscal year. And then what of that was paid in July, because often there's a lot paid in July. There was over 5 million still owed in taxes. These were real estate taxes, meals, sewer and water taxes, personal taxes, etc. What they collected in July was $1.5 million, which means that we still have $3,659,000 still outstanding in taxes. To me, this indicates, and I asked Miss Barrett if this was higher than usual. She sent me numbers back, and it was more than $1 million higher than last year at the same time. It indicates to me that a lot of our residents are struggling to pay their taxes, and to continue for us to to adopt a budget that is higher than last year's when we can't, and we didn't even spend all of last year's, but that we are approving a budget that is that much higher than last year's, even after being pared down, says that we're putting our taxpayers in a very sad situation. The other thing is that we may be able to afford this budget this year with what we have in free cash, et cetera, but we will end up, if we approve this budget, we'll end up at the end of the year with very little free cash available for the following year's budget. So we'll be in even more serious trouble then. So I urge my fellow town meeting members to vote no on this budget on all of 7.
30 seconds.
And that we bring it up, have them come back to us with a more reasonable budget in the fall town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to Precinct 4, John Hammond. We are debating the Subcommittee Report A, 7A in the annual town meeting. Mr.
Well,
Hammond.
I just got a new question in that last presentation. How would our present budget affect the next year? So that's a question for Lynn Barrett, I guess. The other question I have, which might also be for her, is at what point does not having an annual budget affect our ability to get grants from the state? Those are my questions. Thank you.
You. John Hammond's in Precinct 4. Questions for Lynn Barrett. She's the Director of Finance, and we're debating Article 7A. Lynn Barrett.
Thank you. So I actually would like to maybe ask town council this question, because even though we've been operating on the 1/12 budgets, now that we actually are having town meeting and we're voting on the budget, I don't know if you voted the budget down, that we could actually be working on 1/12 budget. So I would just ask if we could have town council maybe assist us in answering that question.
Thank you. That's actually through me, and I'm not going to have town council answer it. I'll answer it. And the answer is we can go back to the 1/12 budgets. That's the response. And at this time, we're going to continue. Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti, did you want to be heard? Your name was on the queue from before. Everett Malaguti.
No, Steve, I'm sorry, I didn't cancel my request. It was for the motion to amend I made earlier.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other speakers, so we're going to call up on the screen the motion for Subcommittee Report 7A. And once we have that, we're going to go to a timer. Okay, I will keep time then. Okay, we don't have a timer that's going to display, but I'm going to start that in a moment so that town meeting members have a full 45 seconds in which to vote. And this is on 7A. We're going to begin voting now. You have 45 seconds in which to vote. You have yes, no, or abstain. This is on the annual town meeting warrant. It is our first new vote tonight on the warrant. On Monday, we did do some votes on the consent agenda. You have 30 seconds left on which to vote. We're voting on the Subcommittee Report A, which is 7A in the annual town meeting. We're going to, when we're through, we're going to receive the vote. We're going to display through the precincts, and while we display, we'll be moving on to the next motion. 10 seconds in the voting. This is on the motion for 7A, and we're continuing with the voting, and the voting is done. And we'll now display 72 in favor, 49 in opposition, 1 abstention. The motion carries. It was a majority vote. We're now going to show the precincts as we do. I will read the motion. We're not going to show Mr. Canty quite yet until we display the precincts. We have precincts 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6. The next motion that town meeting members will consider will be that Mr. Canty moves the town vote to appropriate $74,772,192, and that is for items 14 to 26 as detailed in the Advisory and Finance Subcommittee Report D. And B, that's B. It's a majority vote, it's a roll call. You'll see on A that we're seeing precincts 10, 11, and 12. And soon we will see the final 3 precincts, 13, 14, and 15. You've seen the votes. We're now going to go to Kevin Canty. He is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee on the motion for Subcommittee Report B1. Mr. Canty.
In a unanimous vote of 14 to 0 with no abstentions, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Budget Subcommittee B's section of the budget, incorporating a net decrease of $1,219,179 from the committee's original budget recommendation for this section.
Thank you. We're now going to Precinct 8, Donald Williams. Donald Williams on Subcommittee Report B1. Mr. Williams, good evening again.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I've had a lot of trouble with this budget, and I appreciate the effort of the Finance Committee in reviewing it a second time. And this may be a very subjective opinion that I have, but it's a subjective opinion based on financial conservatism. I think we all know people are in trouble. We all know that the town has a lot of unknowns. But I believe that the budget cuts did not go far enough, considering the situation that we find ourselves in. And I would have wished that the cuts be more along the line of what could be postponed. And postponement here is a viable option because with more time, we'll have more eyes on the problem. We'll have more facts in. And I wish that the departments had been asked to be a lot more conservative and highlight some of the items in their budget that could be postponed. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. We're debating Subcommittee Report B1. I'm not seeing any other speaker requests. We're going to go to the vote for Subcommittee B1. It is a majority vote, a roll call. All of our votes are roll call. We will have 45 seconds in which to vote. Do we have the timer working again? We see the timer is working. The vote is here. You can begin voting now. You are voting on Subcommittee Report B1. It's a majority vote. You have 40 seconds in which to vote. This is Plymouth's annual town meeting. It's coming to you live on August 13. It's a Thursday night. We are in the second half of our second session. We will go till approximately 10 p.m. Plymouth Town Meeting has already voted that if they do not complete all of the business this evening, they will return next Tuesday at 6 p.m. for a third session. We are in the annual town meeting warrant. We are following chronologically. Town meeting has voted some articles on Monday due to a consent agenda. The voting is going down. We have 5 seconds. You'll see the totals down here on the time, and we're done. We're now going to see the total: 70 in favor, 49 in opposition, 2 abstentions. It carries. We're going to go through the precincts. You'll see 1, 2, and 3. You'll see who's voting, and you'll see how they voted. And we are then going to be going to the motion for Subcommittee Report B2. I will read it while we're scrolling through the precincts. Mr. Canty moves that the town vote to appropriate $614,731. It is item 26, and it is by transferring the same from the Pavement Management Stabilization Fund. This is a 2/3 vote, and we'll be going to Mr. Canty now that we've gone through all the precincts. Kevin Canty is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Canty, on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In the same vote, unanimous vote of 14-0 with no abstentions, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this appropriation into the Pavement Management Stabilization Fund.
Thank you. We're first going to go to Precinct 1, Karen Edwards. She has a point of order. Karen Edwards, what is your point of order? Karen Edwards, the town meeting member. Unmute your microphone. You have speaking privileges. Karen Edwards.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Just as the bell was going off, the timer was going off, I was pressing my vote. So I'm not sure if you would be able to put in my vote because I was pressing on my vote and the timer went off. I don't know what you want to do.
And what was your vote?
Yes.
It was a yes. Thank you. We'll now continue with the speakers on this particular subcommittee report B2. We're going to begin with Precinct 10. Peter Neville will be followed by Precinct 15, Michael Hanlon. Mr. Neville, we're debating
Thank you,
subcommittee
Mr.
report B2.
Moderator. My question really has to do with whether or not Article 7, will that be a separate article that we vote on, or are we going to vote in each one of these different parts, A, B, C, D, etc., and then that will conclude Article 7? I ask because the what if question, for instance, 7C is for 27,487,000. This one here is for 614,000. What if town meeting says no to this? How does that affect the people and the projects within that section?
So, 2 questions. First, yes, we are voting each subcommittee report separately. It's essentially a motion to divide. We've divided up Article 7. If you vote no on one of these, then that portion will not be in the budget. We're now going to go to Michael Hanlon, Precinct 15. Mr. Hanlon. Good evening.
I withdraw my request, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no more speakers, we're going to call the vote up for Subcommittee Report B2, and we have a motion before us. You can start your voting now. Town meeting members are voting on the Article 7 budget. We're doing it by subcommittee reports. This is the 3rd subcommittee report on which they are voting. This particular one requires a 2/3 vote. We had a request earlier from town meeting member Nate Siegel that if it is an exact 2/3 vote, he would like to see it displayed. I've granted that request going forward, so we will display if it's an exact 2/3 split, but if it is not, we're not going to be displaying the procedural votes since they are not substantive in terms of accountability of town meeting members to the voters as to a particular issue. The voting has ended. We're now going to see the total. 81 in favor, 36 in opposition, 1 abstention. The motion carries by more than 2/3. We will now then continue with Subcommittee Report C. Mr. Canty moves that the town vote to appropriate $27,487,229, which would be items 27 to 37, as detailed in the Advisory and Finance Committee Subcommittee Report C. Mr. Canty, on the motion.
In a unanimous vote of 14-0 with no abstentions, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Budget Subcommittee C's section of the budget, incorporating a net decrease of $86,632 from the committee's original budget recommendation for this section.
Thank you. And we're now going to go on a point of order to Karen Edwards, Precinct 1. Precinct 1, Karen Edwards, your point of order.
Sorry again, Mr. Moderator. I guess I'm having a little computer problems. I could not see the yes or no votes, so I didn't get to vote on Report B.
I'm being told by the assistant moderator that if you log out of vVoter and log back in, that should help your issue.
Okay.
And if not, please call the help desk. But thank you for your point of order. At this time, we're going to go to Paul Cunningham. Mr. Cunningham moves that the town reduce item 30, fire personal services overtime, by $250,000. The motion to amend is a majority vote. And of course, we will be having a roll call. Precinct 8, Paul Cunningham, on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cunningham, Precinct 8. The overtime budget was originally based on the Plymouth 400 celebration budget for the fire department. This was supposed to be level funded after that, but they added $85,000 to the budget. So $1,840,000 originally, less $250,000 is $1,590,000, or we'll call it $1,600,000. So that has been a previous budget for that category of overtime. All the town meeting members received a searing email in the last day from the president of the firefighters union, saying that this token reduction will cause brownouts in Pine Hills and the closing of Station 3, and that all the other stations would have to crisscross and cover for the close of Station 3. It's really rather an absurd reaction to that. In the end, with this reduction, the fire trucks will roll, all the problems solved, all the services are done, everyone will be paid, and maybe in a bad year, the department may go over the budget by a few thousand. Their $12 million budget, payroll and everything else is intact. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. We're going to go first to Precinct 11, Jeffrey DeLapp, and he'll be followed by Precinct 13, Joseph Barron. Mr. DeLapp, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd just like to hear from Chief Bradley on the potential detrimental effects this could have on the department's ability to operate, never mind during a global pandemic.
Thank you. Plymouth Fire Chief Edward Bradley responding to a question from Jeffrey DeLapp. He is the town meeting member. Welcome once again, Chief Bradley, to Plymouth Annual Town Meeting.
Good evening. The overtime budget line item is actually an efficient way of covering when you have people missing or you need extra people on duty. I have a collective bargaining agreement that has been vetted and approved by the town meeting members that I have to follow. And it allows them time off. They have vacation time, they have sick time.
And when not enough people are going to show up for a shift and I can't keep all 7 stations open, then that's when I reach in for overtime. As a for instance, today, there were 9 people that were out. But you only had to call in 2 on overtime, and that was to give me enough people to keep all 7 stations open. This time of year, in the summertime, when they're using a lot of vacation time, I'll give you an instance that happened this last Saturday. During the day shift, there were 10 people out. I had to call in 6 on overtime in order to get enough people so that all 7 stations would be open. Bottom line is, if you take that kind of money out of the budget, yes, we will not have enough money to get through the year to cover all the vacancies, and we will do rolling brownouts like we did in 2004 and 2005. And that was when the town had finally had enough and said, fund that overtime budget. We don't want the stations closed anymore, because there was always some disaster when you had a station closed because of the long response times. So yes, without that money and the ability to cover all these vacancies and the ability to bring people in to fill in the shifts when there's not enough people, we will have to roll in brownouts. And also, I want to point out a false statement that Mr. Paul Cunningham made, that money was added into the budget for the 400. That's a false statement, and I've told him that in the past, and he keeps repeating it. So at this point, I'm going to call it what it is. It's a lie, and he's bringing lies to you to try to get his agenda passed. Now, you can check with both the town manager and the Lynn Barrett, the finance director. They had set up an account that was going to have money in it. It would serve the police department, the DPW, the harbor master, Division of Marine and Environmental Affairs, and the fire department for events for the 400 that required additional overtime to cover. It was not put into anyone's operating budget, and they can give you the status of what that account is and where that money is, but it is not in any operating budget. So that is a false statement, and we got to get down to the truth. Don't be telling lies all the time. Collectively, just to give you an instance, collectively, the firefighters have over 22,000 hours of vacation that they've earned, and that goes up. It's gone up this year by another 1,000 hours. That's people longer on the job, so they gain more benefits. They have collectively 114,000 hours of sick time on the book that can be used for sick time or family sick time. The types of vacancies I cover would be, sick time, family sick time, bereavement, jury duty, military leave, when someone's assigned to the Massachusetts Fire Academy to get certified, injury on duty time, and any professional development, we send them off to a class. When not enough people are going to show up for that shift so that I can keep all 7 stations open, that's when I call in people to cover those shifts. That much of a money loss out of there will result in having to do brownouts because they won't have the funding available to call in enough people all the time. The reason it's gone up a little bit, and it was only went up $85,000, and after talking with the finance director, it was correct because we've got a couple things are happening. People are getting step raises, which means they're making more per hour, and they're also a COLA raise of 2%. So in order to cover the same amount of hours that we did last year, it's going to cost more this year because they're making more money and they have more time off. I think that answers the question that Mr. Lapp asked.
Thank you. Point of order now from Alan Costello, Precinct 10. Mr. Costello, your point of order.
My point of order, Mr. Moderator, is have some decorum in the meeting. To have a presenter call a town meeting member a liar. The facts may not be what the chief thinks they are, but I think you should have
Thank you, Mr. Costello. Your comments are so noted. Precinct 5, Patricia McCarthy on the motion, followed by, Joseph Barron, I recognized earlier. Mr. Barron, Precinct 13, followed by Patricia McCarthy, Precinct 5. Mr. Barron. Joseph Barron is in Precinct 13. We're debating a motion to amend on Subcommittee Report C, as well as the main motion on Subcommittee Report C.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I had mentioned before, I'm retired, a 40-year firefighter from the city of Quincy. 10 years as chief. I was promoted chief of department on around the same time as Ed Bradley. Ed Bradley is noted, considered a resource to all fire chiefs in the state. He's hugely respected. He very succinctly answered the question of losing those budget numbers. Plymouth is a very varied fire problem, and you know, I look at this year as the droughts we've had, the forests in this city. Some of the problems that Plymouth faces are unique in the Commonwealth, and it is a reality that stations would be browned out. If you look at the way fires grow exponentially, you get beyond a 4-minute response time, and you hit the 7-minute area. That fire has already reached full room involvement, and it's threatening an entire residence. This is a professional fire department. It needs to be treated that way. They're not, you know, volunteers do a great job, but volunteers are not interior firefighters. And that's what we enjoy in the town of Plymouth. So it would be foolhardy to cut this overtime budget. And I urge every town meeting member to vote for their own safety and not consider cutting. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes. First, have a motion to close debate. Precinct 11, Christopher Merrill. So if we can show the queue, we'll take Mr. Merrill off and you'll see who we have in the queue. We're now going to vote on whether to close debate on Mr. Cunningham's motion to amend. Town meeting members will see when it comes up that they'll be able to vote. We're going to show it on, there it is, closing debate on, not on 7, but on the motion to amend. So we do want to correct that. It's closing debate on the motion to amend. It was a motion to amend Subcommittee Report C. Town meeting members will be voting on Mr. Cunningham's motion to amend to reduce item 30, fire personal services, by $250,000. This is a majority vote on the motion to amend, and it's a motion to amend under Subcommittee Report C, and it is a motion to amend, and it will be to close debate on the motion to amend. And if we can just correct the caption on whether to close debate on the motion to amend. Are you able to show that differently?
I can't do it during a vote.
Okay, we can't do it during a vote. So town meeting members are reminded this is to close debate on Article 7, Subcommittee Report C, motion to amend. You'll now begin the voting. Thank you. And ignore that reading on the screen. Town meeting members, let's wait a second and let's call up again on the screen a motion to amend. This is a motion to amend to close debate on a motion to amend. If we can take off the vote totals from a prior vote. What?
Yeah, it was the 7th closed debate you had, which is why it says 7.
Yeah. Again, we haven't voted yet on whether to close debate, and so if we can clear and caption it so that town meeting members can vote on whether to close debate on the motion to amend. Okay, here we go. Closing debate on motion to amend. 45 seconds, you begin voting now. Thank you. This is Plymouth Annual Town Meeting. It's coming to you live from PAC TV Studios, from Plymouth North High School, and from Town Hall in the Great Room, and from the homes of many Plymouth Town Meeting members, because they're participating remotely this evening, as they did on Monday. This is under a new enabling statute from the Massachusetts Legislature so that Plymouth Town Meeting members can meet safely and in a healthy way. They are virtual this evening with a V-Voter platform and a Zoom webinar platform. They have been training through the month of July. They practiced last week at a presentation, a preview. We're now completing the voting on their motion to close debate on the motion to amend. 99 say yes, 22 say no, 0 abstentions. We're finishing the debate. We finished it. And we're now going to vote on Mr. Cunningham's motion to amend. So this is now a substantive vote. A yes would be to reduce Item 30 by 250,000. A no would be to keep the main motion as presented from the Advisory and Finance Committee. We're going to be looking now for, on the screen, for the motion to amend to come up, because we're going to be voting on the motion to amend. And town meeting members will have, here we go, amend motion. You've got 45 seconds. The voting can start now. Plymouth Town Meeting is now voting on Mr. Cunningham's motion to amend to reduce subcommittee report budget by $250,000. After this, we will continue. We will, if the motion passes, we will be then debating subcommittee report C as amended. If it does not pass, we'll be voting on the main motion from the Advisory and Finance Committee. Town meeting members tonight have 45 seconds in which to vote. Following this vote, their votes will be displayed by precinct on the screen so that they can see that their vote was properly recorded, and so that you watching at home can see how your town meeting members have voted. That completes the voting. You'll be seeing the results momentarily, and this is the majority vote, and the total is 25 voting in favor, 97 in opposition, 1 abstention. The motion does not carry. The motion to amend, we're going through the precincts. You'll see a red is a no, a green is a yes, and the 1 abstention will be yellow. Town meeting members are voting by precinct. We have 4, 5, and 6, and we continue with town meeting. Following this, we'll be back on the main motion under subcommittee report C, precincts 7, 8, and 9. We have 15 precincts in the town of Plymouth. We have 135 elected town meeting members. You'll see here what we're looking at in terms of participation with this vote. 123 town meeting members in the past 10 years. The average is 110. Town meeting has greatly increased above the average this week with the virtual remote participation. That concludes the displays. I don't see any speakers requesting, so we'll now go to the main motion. It was not amended, so it is a motion for subcommittee report C. It is a vote to appropriate $27,487,229, items 27 to 37. Your voting begins now. And we will be voting, and after we'll take a point of order. You are voting on subcommittee report C, and this is the main motion. And your yes will be to vote in favor of the Finance Committee recommendation. A no would be in opposition. People can also abstain. Town meeting members have 45 seconds in which to vote. Following this vote, we'll be going to subcommittee report D, and that is that Mr. Canty moves the town vote to appropriate $10,715,110 for items 38 to 43 as detailed in the Advisory and Finance Subcommittee Report D. The voting has ended, and the vote is 93 in favor, 28 in opposition, 1 abstention. We'll scroll through the precincts, and we'll now go to Precinct 6, Paul McGee. Paul McGee, your point of order. Good evening. You need to unmute. You have speaking privileges. We're scrolling through precincts 4, 5, and 6. And we're waiting for Mr. McGee to come in. Mr. Paul McGee, you're garbled, Mr. McGee. If you cannot come through on the Zoom webinar, you'll need to call the number here at the studio. And we can provide you with that. But sounds like you're having a connection issue, Mr. McGee, with your bandwidth. And we're having trouble hearing you. Perhaps call the help desk, precincts 13, 14, and 15. And Mr. McGee, if you could call the help desk and tell us your point of order, and we'll take it up. It sounds like you're having connection issues. And we're going to go now to Mr. Canty for Subcommittee Report D. Kevin Canty is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Canty.
In a unanimous vote of 14 to 0 to 0, The Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Budget Subcommittee D's section of the budget, incorporating a net decrease of $465,769 from the committee's original budget recommendation for this section.
Thank you. Kevin Canty is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. It's a majority vote. A roll call if it's not unanimous. We have a point of order from Neil Foley. He is in Precinct 5. We welcome Mr. Foley to this session of the annual town meeting. Mr. Foley, your point of order. Neil Foley. If you have talking... He's going to call in. Mr. Foley, I'm told you need to call in. So Nicole has the number.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, go ahead. Mr. Foley?
Yes, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm not sure that my vote was counted on the last vote on the 7C.
7C, and what was your vote?
My vote was no.
Your vote was no on 7C. Thank you. Precinct 2, Richard.
I'm sorry. Yes. It was to pass the budget, correct.
Thank you. It was a yes. Precinct 2, Richard Sirrico has a point of order. Mr. Sirrico. Good evening. And you need to unmute. You have talking privileges. Richard Sirrico, Precinct 2.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I wanted to note for the record that the previous speaker, who is a deputy chief of the fire department, voted against the motion to amend by Paul Cunningham. And it seems to me that this is a violation of the town charter.
Mr. Sirrico, again, it's not a point of order. You're disagreeing with either his vote or his, it's not a point of order. Point of order is a procedural question, and I've repeatedly said over the years that I do not have any enforcement authority. Town meeting members are exempt from the statute relating to
I know they're exempt from the statute, but we have a charter provision, and I wanted to make it known to all town meeting members that that charter provision was not being abided by.
Mr. Sirrico, again.
That's all my point of order was.
Thank you. And it's not a point of order. It would be a procedural matter for a point of order, and that is not a procedural matter at this time. And that's the second time I've told you that. We're going to now continue with a subcommittee report D. I have no speakers. We're now going to go to the vote. And we'll display the vote on the screen. And when we're ready, showing that, and with a timer for 45 seconds, we'll then have the vote. The timer is showing. This is for subcommittee report D. And here it is. Town meeting can vote now. Thank you. Your voting is counting down. We are voting on subcommittee report D. We will then go to subcommittee report E. Subcommittee report E, Mr. Canty moves the town vote to appropriate $4,587,164, items 44 to 60, as detailed in the Advisory and Finance Subcommittee Report E. But first, we're going to look at the vote for Subcommittee Report D. And here are the results. 85 in favor, 38 in opposition, 0 abstentions. The motion carries the majority vote. We will scroll through the precincts, and I am going to preview the fact that with the main motion under Report E, we have a motion to amend. And I'm going to read the motion to amend for those of you who are watching on PAC TV. Betsy Hall is a Precinct 12 town meeting member. She moves the town reduce item 50, library personal services, by $129,096 and reduce item 51 and all other expenses by $150,000. The motion to amend is a majority vote, and also the main motion is a majority vote. And we will first begin, once we go through the precincts, with Kevin Canty, who is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. You'll see precincts 13, 14, and 15. We now can go to Mr. Canty with his recommendation on Report E. Kevin Canty, good evening.
In a unanimous vote of 14-0 with no abstentions, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Budget Subcommittee E's section of the budget, incorporating a net decrease of $344,619 from the committee's original budget recommendation for this section.
Thank you. And now Betsy Hall, Precinct 12, on your motion to amend. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Trifletti. This is Betsy Hall at Precinct 12. Fellow town meeting members, I am a strong supporter of our library system. I have always voted for the full library budget. I grew up using the library, and so did my children. As an English and literature teacher, I taught my students how to use the library and required them to write papers utilizing library materials. This amendment in no way questions the importance of libraries. However, I decided to offer this amendment to the library budget because the town of Plymouth is in a serious financial crisis. Many of our buildings need extensive repair, as do many of our roads. Some of our buildings are in deplorable condition. We have been told that these repairs will cost many millions of dollars. In addition, we have huge costs for the benefit packages for our full-time employees and retirees. Similar to other town meeting members, I was dismayed and disappointed that the budget request for 2021 was so high. I had hoped for significant cuts as we were in serious financial difficulty even before the COVID-19 issue entered our lives. My amendment recommends a reduction in library staff and a reduction in library materials and supplies. The reduction in staff amendment would reduce the staff by $129,000. The library currently has 22 full-time positions. The reduction in materials and supplies would reduce the materials and supplies amount by less than half. This amendment will reduce the total library budget by $279,096. The library is requesting $1,432,563 in salaries and wages. This total does not include benefits. If you add benefits to this amount, it is well over $1.5 million for salaries and benefits for library employees. Other expenses in the library request, which includes materials and supplies, are listed at $523,887. This brings the total for the library request to more than $2 million. My amendment asks for a smaller percentage of this total. The reason that I chose the library for my amendment is that the library budget of more than $2 million is so large. It is greater than the budget requests of all these departments combined. The Recreation Department, the Public Health Department, the Center for Active Living, and the Department of Natural Resources. I feel that the library budget can absorb this small reduction, especially as the library has been closed for many months and may be closed for many more months. Our library is a very important aspect of our town. However, keeping our real estate taxes from continuing to skyrocket is also important. So is repairing our buildings and roads. Paying our debts and balancing our budget is also vital. I believe it is our job as town meeting members to be responsible to the residents who elected us to represent them. This means spending money wisely.
Betsy
We
Hall,
must
do you
begin
need
a very
additional
serious
time?
discussion about priorities as a town. It is my hope that this amendment will help be the beginning of this discussion. I believe that we must all work together to reduce our town budget as much as possible. Our taxes are rising dramatically every year. We as town meeting members must actively work to
Betsy
stop
Hall,
this
you've exceeded the
unsustainable
time limit.
increase.
Do you need more time?
Just two more sentences, or maybe three. We must prioritize our needs and wants, and my amendment is a modest attempt to begin this process. This amendment does not include requesting the closing of the Management Library. Only the selectmen have this authority. I request that you vote yes for my amendment.
I'd ask the town meeting members stay within the limits of the 3-minute limit for this virtual town meeting. We're going to go to Precinct 8, Don Williams, followed by Precinct 15, Michael Hanlon. We have town meeting members speaking before the town resident who is on the phone waiting to speak. Mr. Williams, did you care to be heard on the motion to amend?
No, I have nothing further to say.
Michael Hanlon, Precinct 15, did you care to be heard? Cancel the request, I see. I'm going to go to Precinct 11, Anne Marie Ross, followed by Precinct 10, Brian Fitzgerald, speaking on the motion. Anne Marie Ross.
Good evening. This is Anne Marie Ross from Precinct 11, and I'm here to speak against Ms. Hall's request to reduce that library budget. Full disclosure, school librarian here in Plymouth. So the library is, of course, near and dear to my heart. But when Ms. Hall said that the library has been closed, in a traditional sense, yes, the library has been closed. We're not allowed in to go browsing. However, they have been providing all kinds of online resources to members of the town throughout their closure. They've also started curbside pickup so that there are physical books that are being able to be put in the hands of our residents. I think that any kind of cuts to the library budget it is just really hurting our town. And so I'm going to vote no against her amendment. And I thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Precinct 4, Charles Vautrain, followed by Precinct 10, Brian Fitzgerald. Mr. Vautrain. Charles Vautrain is a town meeting member in Precinct 4. Good evening, Mr. Vautrain. We are debating Subcommittee Report E, and we have a motion to amend. If you can unmute, Mr.
Okay, sorry, can you hear me now,
Yes, we
Steve?
can. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I am talking against Betsy Hall's motion. I agree with what Anne Marie just said about the online resources and the curbside pickup. Also, there are such things as accreditation that the library has or needs to enable them to get grants and everything else through the state and federally. And by cutting this money, you endanger their ability to get grants, which actually help us pay for the library because it's extra money. So I'm going to vote against Betsy Hall. I'm going to vote for the library for them to have the budget stay intact. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to Mr. Fitzgerald, I have a motion to close debate. It is from Francis O'Brien. He is in Precinct 11. It is to close debate on Betsy Hall's motion to amend. We're going to go and show the speaker's queue. We'll take Mr. O'Brien now out of the queue. Town members can see those who still wish to be heard. We're now going to go and vote on a motion to close debate. This is to close debate on the motion to amend. It's a 2/3 vote. It's not debatable. When you see it on the screen, we're going to look now. There's the 45 seconds. You can start voting now. Town meeting members are voting on whether they want to close debate on Betsy Hall's motion to amend. It is to amend the main motion under Subcommittee Report E and to reduce the library personal services and all other expenses for a total of $279,096. We're voting whether to close debate, and town meeting members have 18 seconds in which to vote on whether to close debate. This requires a 2/3 vote in order to close debate, and it is on the motion to amend. We would then go to the main motion. We're counting down. Town meeting members will soon see the results of whether to close debate. We're going to show the results. 88 having voted in favor, 35 in opposition, 0 abstentions. It is more than 2/3. It does carry. We're closing debate. We're now going to the main motion. The motion to amend for Betsy Hall. So let's go to that motion to amend. We're closing debate on that motion to amend. Again, it is to reduce Subcommittee Report E, and town meeting members are voting whether to do that, whether reduce by $279,000. You'll see it's on here. Start voting now. You're voting on whether to amend Subcommittee Report E. It is a motion to amend from Betsy Hall. She is a Precinct 12 town meeting member. She is a precinct chair. Town meeting members are continuing to vote And although it is frozen on the screen, OTI is keeping track of the vote, and they will indicate to us.
25 seconds.
You have 25 seconds in which to vote. Plymouth Town Meeting is coming to you live from PAC TV. We are at the Plymouth Annual Town Meeting. Town meeting members are voting on whether to amend Subcommittee Report E, and town meeting members continue to vote.
5 seconds.
And 5 seconds left on whether or not to have that motion to amend. And that concludes the voting. And we're now going to show on whether to amend. 28 say yes, 96 says no. The motion does not carry. We now go back to the main motion under Subcommittee Report E. And I see on my screen, Precinct 1, Everett Malaguti wishes to speak on the main motion, Subcommittee Report E. Mr. Malaguti, good evening.
Good evening, Everett Malaguti, Precinct 1. My question pertains partially to this motion as well as a couple past ones, as was brought up earlier tonight about the funding for police, fire, public works, and community resources, planning and development due to the 400th. And it was talked about that there was a fund established by the town manager. Is there a recollection of how much was requested in that fund set aside? And if anything doesn't materialize as planned, would that be coming back before us in the fall for a reduction of services and revenue?
So, Mr. Malaguti, we do want to stay within the scope of the article. And so with respect to Subcommittee Report E, I will ask the Director of Finance, Lynn Barrett, as to whether or not she can respond regarding Plymouth 400th and as it relates to Subcommittee Report E. Lynn Barrett. She is the Director of Finance for the town of Plymouth. And go ahead.
Hi, so in last year's budget, fiscal 2020, we had set aside money in salary reserve, which is part of the budget, for overtime for various departments. We also set aside money in salary reserve for contractual agreements. So none of that money was actually expended for the 400th because the events that we had budgeted for did not happen, but we actually are using that money for contractual benefits. That's part of the money that we encumbered from fiscal 20 to 21 to pay for Article 1 in the special that you voted on Monday. Secondly, in Subcommittee E's report, there is a line item in the planning department's budget to help fund the 400th committee in their events, and that line item actually was cut in half in the advisory and finance recommended budget.
Discussion on Subcommittee Report E. I don't have anyone else in the speaker's queue. Let's call up on the screen the Subcommittee Report E vote and the timer, and we'll be taking the vote on Subcommittee Report E under Article 7. And there it is on the screen, and we're looking for the timer. There we go. We can start voting now. Town meeting members can vote. The timer is running. You're voting on Subcommittee Report E. Following this vote, we'll display, and I'm going to say, following this, we're going to go to Subcommittee Report F. Mr. Canty moves the town vote to appropriate $102,526,853. We're moving on to items 61 to 64 as detailed in the Advisory and Finance Subcommittee Report F. It is a majority vote, a roll call if it is not unanimous. This will be after we complete voting on Subcommittee Report E. You've heard town meeting members debating Subcommittee Report E, and we now complete the voting. 93 in favor, 27 say no, 2 abstentions. The motion carries. We're going to scroll through the precincts. And while we scroll through the precincts, we have a procedural motion from Joseph Trishelli. And so I'd like to just hear from Mr. Trishelli as to what he is proposing as a procedural motion. while we watch the precinct votes on report E. Mr.
I
Trishelli.
apologize. That was a little preemptive. It's actually for subcommittee report F.
All right.
So I can
call on
hold
you.
off until we get to there.
We'll call on you as soon as we hear from Mr. Canty. Thank you. And we're continuing on. We're going to clear the speaker screen with Mr. Malaguti. And we're showing precincts 10, 11, and 12. And then we're going to go to 13, 14, and 15. And we can now go to Kevin Canty. He is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. And we have Subcommittee Report F. Mr. Canty.
In a unanimous vote of 14 to 0 to 0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve Budget Subcommittee F section of the budget, incorporating a net decrease of $1,900,000 from the committee's original budget recommendation for this section.
Thank you. Joseph Trishelli, Precinct 11, your motion to amend.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to motion to restore the $1.9 million back to the school's operating budget. As we prepare to send roughly 7,500 students back to our 14 schools, it's critical that these funds be applied to provide the services needed to keep our facilities properly maintained, as well as ensuring FTEs are preserved, allowing for greater flexibility to adapt to the changing landscape during the COVID-19 pandemic. These funds will help provide PPE, sanitation, and the ability to meet the requirements set forth by the Massachusetts Department of Education. Families overwhelmingly want their children back to school. But for the small population who have high-risk students that don't want their children to go back to the brick and mortar school locations, the only option is to restore this funding. I asked town meeting to look elsewhere for these funds. To put our potential education costs in perspective, and this is a very conservative lowball projection, assuming only 10% of our elementary students choose to be taught remotely, we would need approximately 15 additional classroom teachers, 2 SPED teachers, assuming 15% of students would require special education supports, as well as the additional support staff. That's $1 million conservatively for salaries. Secondary would be much greater due to the number of special licenses needed, including biology, chemistry, physics, history, English, you name it. We can't cut teachers from this classroom necessarily to cover the costs we need to keep within the physical distancing guidelines from the Department of Ed and CDC. It's also important to note that we would not be able to hire that many teachers at this point of the year to cover the cost. Given that, we'd be forced to use the recommended services from the Department of Ed, which are available to us to support remote teaching, which exceed the projected costs that were just mentioned by approximately $200,000 per semester. Finally, I don't know how many of you watched that school committee meeting that they made this decision to cut this money, but the decision for the school committee to make the budget adjustment was very difficult. And because of the unknown financial future and expenditures necessary to educate these students in Plymouth, the challenges that have been posed by COVID-19 are critical to ensuring that we maintain our status as one of the top tier education systems in the state. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a motion to amend from Joseph Trishelli to increase by $1,900,000 to the original Advisory and Finance Committee recommendation of $104,426,853. Dr. Gary Maestas is in studio to answer questions. Our next speaker, Precinct 10, Alan Costello. Mr. Costello, on the motion to amend and on Subcommittee Report F. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. I'm going to speak to the Subcommittee Report F. I have 2 questions, one for Mr. Canty, one for Dr. Maestas. Mr. Canty, when was this unanimous vote taken for the Subcommittee F? Through you.
That was at the July 8th, through you, Mr. Moderator, the July 8th meeting of the Advisory and Finance Committee.
Thank you, Kevin Canty. Alan Costello, go ahead.
Thank you. Now for Dr. Maestas, does this budget reflect the most recent school committee meeting that I'm aware of, where the committee voted to have some sort of hybrid for the school year, this upcoming school year? And is there going to be any additional monies, or are there going to be some monies taken back out? How is the new course of action by the school committee going to impact this number?
Dr. Gary Maestas, Superintendent of Schools. Dr. Maestas.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There's some really good questions posed regarding the school budget. One of the things that we have to do over the days to come is really determine what our true cost will be to offer the education as we have prescribed it moving forward. One of the things that we've had to do is count on money that has been provided by the County of Plymouth. That is money that is brought to us by the federal government, distributed to the county. That's about $225 per student that we've been able to count on. Keep in mind that that money has been earmarked for reimbursement for preparing schools to open. So that's the PPE that we've purchased and other items that we have in preparation of opening school. The school committee's decision about a week and a half ago is relative to the decision to how we're going to open, if we're going to go face-to-face, hybrid, or remote. The school committee determined that that hybrid would be the option, and having a remote option for students that would not participate in the hybrid model. So at this point, what we're doing now is we are surveying our parents. The survey went out yesterday. We'll have a good idea of where students, how they will be studying moving forward in the fall. But the expenses that we have to actually work with the hybrid model and the remote model, those are question marks that we have as we go forward. The federal government and also the state of Massachusetts has determined that they would support monetarily some of the opportunities that we have. But at this point, all we have to count on so far is some grants for technology, which we have utilized, and also $225 per student. And we're probably about halfway through that allocation at this point as we speak tonight.
Thank you. Precinct 7, Nathan Siegel, followed by Precinct 10, Brendan Brady. We are debating a motion to amend Subcommittee Report F. Mr. Siegel, good evening.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. Nate Siegel, Precinct 7. So I want to express my support for the teachers and administrators of the schools. I think that most town meeting members, if not all, will do whatever it takes to get our schools in position to operate safely. That being said, I'm just a little bit hesitant to make such a drastic change to the school budget that went through such a rigorous process to get to the number that it's at. So I guess my question, and a quick statement after the question is, my question is to Dr. Maestas. I mean, is that money needed at this time to ensure that the schools, teachers, students, staff can operate safely? And if the answer is no, I just want to express my support that if that changes going forward into the fall, I hope that the select board and others won't hesitate to call a special town meeting or do whatever it takes to make sure that that money can be appropriated, because that's, to me right now, the most important issue in our community. Thank you.
Dr. Gary Maestas.
Mr. Siegel, I think that's a very good question, and that's a question that we've been debating in the school department, because there are a lot of expenses that we have to realize that are coming up that we didn't know when this vote was made, because we didn't understand quite fully what the Department of Education was going to require the school department to do. The Department of Education required all schools in Massachusetts to work on 3 different models: the face-to-face, the hybrid, and the remote model. And we actually had the opportunity during about a month period of time to pressure test what those models would look like within our schools. During that time, we have concluded that the hybrid model will actually allow about half of our students into our buildings. So that means our population in all our schools will be cut in half during 2 days a week. We are left with another group of kids that will study at home. The K through 6 students will actually study at home with Plymouth teachers, which means we have to employ teachers that are Plymouth Public School teachers that are certified in grades K through 6 to be able to address those students. So we'll have a group of teachers that will teach in classrooms. We'll have another set of teachers that will teach students remotely. They will have distinct responsibilities that will be separate. The other issue that we have to deal with is the high school, which is very different. The grades 7 and 8 and grades 9 through 12 are quite different than the elementary. Those of you that are in education would understand that in the middle school, we have very specific certifications. In elementary, you are certified to teach all subjects in elementary. At the middle school and high school, you are certified with a specific license, whether it's science, social studies, English, math, or the arts, or other supplemental areas that we cover. So the dilemma that we have is determining exactly what that coverage for those students will be that are on remote. We are also contracting with vendors to actually help us to provide some online content. So in the days to come, weeks to come, we will realize exactly what those true costs will be. We will be working with the Department of Education to help us determine what other funding sources that we have available. But as of today, town meeting, we do not have any other sources of revenue that will help us to cover those expenses. We are hoping, and that the Department of Education, the governor's office, has said that they are looking at other opportunities to infuse funds in schools in Massachusetts. But I will add, the close of my comments is every single school in Massachusetts, every city and town, we are all dealing with the same demand and the same requirements. So this is a drain on all our communities, and hopefully we'll get some aid to be able to help us fill the gaps.
Thank you, Dr. Gary Maestas. He is the superintendent for Plymouth Public Schools. We are debating Subcommittee Report F. We have a motion from town meeting member Mr. Trishelli, and at this time we're going to go to Precinct 10, Brendan Brady. Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm going to support Mr. Trishelli's motion. Last week, the governor and state legislature voted to level fund state aid for education in Massachusetts, one of 2 budgets that they chose to level fund, whereas the others are getting cut. I think that at the state level, they understand how much of a challenge it's going to be for school systems to accommodate these new needs that have hit the schools. I think that this is money put to good use, especially when we consider that getting students back in schools is one of the most critical components to restoring our economy back to a positive place. So if this money helps the schools get our students educated properly and safely, and it's helping people back into working positions, I think it is money well spent. Thank you.
Precinct 11, Kenneth Howe moves to close debate. It is not debatable. It requires a 2/3 vote. We'll show the queue. Moving Mr. Howe, you'll see that in the queue we have 1 speaker remaining. We're now going to vote on whether to close debate on Joseph Trishelli's motion to amend Subcommittee Report F. So you're going to be voting when it shows on the screen. Closing debate, 45 seconds begins now. You can now begin voting as to whether to close debate on the motion to amend. It's a motion to restore the $1.9 million that was originally recommended by the Advisory and Finance Committee and was reduced by them at their July 8 meeting. You have 30 seconds in which to vote. It's to whether to close debate on this motion to amend. And we're continuing Plymouth's annual town meeting. We're in Article 7 of the annual warrant. It has to do with our budget. Town meeting members have approved A through E. They're moving forward with the budget. Under Article 7, The voting now is concluding on whether to close debate. You'll see 109 say yes, 9 say no. We're done debating this motion. We're now going to move to vote on the motion. When it comes up, you'll be voting on the motion to amend. Again, a yes vote is for the $1,900,000. The no vote is to have no motion to amend with respect to that amount. You're looking now on your motion to amend. The voting begins now. You're voting on whether to amend Subcommittee Report F, Mr. Trishelli's motion. You have 37 seconds in which to vote. Town meeting members have been continuing throughout the evening. We are in the last hour of this session. They previously voted to continue on Tuesday. We will resume on Tuesday at 6 p.m., the annual town meeting warrant. Tonight will continue close to the 10 o'clock hour, absent any motions from town meeting members. 10 seconds to vote on this motion to amend under Article 7, Subcommittee Report F. It's a motion to amend, and the voting has completed. We'll now see the results of the motion to amend. 64 in favor, 55 in opposition, 3 abstentions. The motion carries. We now move on to the main motion under Subcommittee Report F. I'm not seeing any more speakers, so let's call up on the screen the main motion on Subcommittee Report F. Actually, I am seeing Peter Neville, Precinct 10, is asked to speak on the main motion on Subcommittee Report F. Mr. Neville, on the motion, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm just a question, I guess, to Dr. Maestes with regard to whether or not any consideration has been given to use of alternative space for classrooms and the use of alternative personnel who may be certified or not, but have professional credentials to support perhaps their mastery of a subject, and provide, in so doing, perhaps get outside of the envelope of the public school building and the certification requirements for personnel, and meet the expectations of parents and children for continuing education. I'm thinking about spaces like the TJ Maxx, for instance, or the Empty Shaw's building, or the sports complex. Maybe even that building they want to put the fire station in.
Mr. Neville, a
or
reminder,
tech
we
program.
don't have line item authority as a town meeting. We just have bottom line authority. So I just like to keep within the authority of town meeting.
Okay, so really, it was just a question as to whether or not any thought has been given. You know, if this was a third world country, we'd be looking at outfits like the Peace Corps.
Thank you, Mr. Neville. Dr.
One more
Maestas.
question, one more thought. The literacy program at the library is perhaps the closest model I can think of. And I just wondered whether or not the school has looked at that.
Thank you, Dr. Maestas.
Yes, we have looked at a number of options throughout the town of Plymouth. I've actually consulted with Atlantic Properties for property that is available in town of Plymouth, not only for classroom opportunities, but also for storage. Keep in mind that we have to really redesign our classrooms because of the 6-foot distancing. So we've actually used all our cafeterias for storage at the elementary level because we've moved a lot of desks out. So all our schools have somewhat been redesigned for the entry of students. But the options that you have mentioned, Mr. Neville, we have consulted with our internal staff. I think one of the biggest issues that we have is human resources dealing with certifications. The Department of Education has been very strict on what we can offer for classes and also the certifications required to teach it. I think that's the biggest dilemma that we have at the high school level, not so much at the elementary level. The high school level is our biggest dilemma because of the specifics on the specific licenses that you need to be able to educate kids in the curriculum that is offered based on the common frameworks of Massachusetts.
Precinct 11, Christopher Merrill. Mr. Merrill on the motion. Subcommittee Report F.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Moderator. This is a two-part question for Dr. Maestas, if I may.
Go ahead.
So, Dr. Maestas, are we anticipating any other significant increases to the existing costs, such as IT costs for updated systems or devices, and also for extra continuing professional development for our teachers?
Yes,
Dr. Maestas.
Mr. Merrill, there are a couple of items that we've had to take into consideration as we begin the school year. We are purchasing a significant quantity of Chromebooks for students. Dr. Campbell, the incoming superintendent, has worked with our incoming assistant superintendent, Dr. Rogers, on looking at grants to actually purchase a large number of Chromebooks. And those Chromebooks have been ordered and are being purchased through grants. Those grants have been made available through this period of time. So that is, a good move for us. But that won't, that'll help with our operating expenses, but it really is going to leave us with the expenses to really hire additional staff and accommodate for staff that we need to move forward. One of the other issues that we have to address, and I talked to Assistant Superintendent Friday the other night regarding our substitute teachers. In order for us to get substitutes, it's going to be very, very difficult for us. They will be much in demand, and we need to consider also increasing our sub pay, our substitute pay, because we are the lowest in the region, and most school districts are looking at increasing it and doubling it because of trying to bring people that have those licenses and have that certification to come back into that environment. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. But your second question, if you could repeat it, that would help me.
Yeah, sure. And the second question is, has the schools attempted to redeploy any other staff members to other roles?
Yes, we are looking at, again, one of the things that you have to take into consideration with an educational environment is certification is really important. We have, through the budget cut that we made to be able to meet the requests of the Board of Selectmen, is we actually did shift staff into different roles to be able to accommodate those cuts. But as the days go forward, as the days move forward to the beginning of the school year, we will move staff and we will make adjustments based on the enrollment numbers that we get on the survey that we have going out. You also asked about professional development. Professional development, based on the Department of Education's mandate that we add 10 days to the beginning of the school year for professional development. We are adding 9 days, and that's been negotiated with our association, our teachers association. Some school districts are doing 10, we're doing 9. We are doing increased professional development for our staff to be able to bring them up to speed on a lot of information that they need relative to remote learning and also face-to-face learning under the COVID conditions that we live in today. So I would say that by our October town meeting, we would have a really good handle on some of the other expenses that we have coming down the pike. But I can tell you that we will be able to open the doors and we will realize what those expenses are as we move forward.
Thank you. We're continuing with Subcommittee Report F. I'm not seeing any speakers. Let's call the vote up on the screen. And also the timing. There's the vote. We're looking for the time. There's the time. Start voting now. You're voting on Subcommittee Report F as amended. And town meeting will continue. This is a majority vote, and of course it's a roll call. And we are continuing with the voting, and thereafter we'll go to Article 7B. We have a motion from Mr. Canty, moves town vote to raise and appropriate $4,812,859, items 65 to 68, shown in the budget report attached to the motions. Is to defray water direct costs and transfer $1,352,886 for water indirect costs. We're now going to see, however, the vote on Subcommittee Report F. Town meeting members 100 in favor, 21 in opposition, 0 abstentions. The motion carries. We're now going to scroll through the precincts to see just how our town meeting members voted on this subcommittee report. And as we do that, precincts 1, 2, and 3 are being shown. And we're going to then go to B after we look at all the precincts. That was going to be done in 7B by raising $6,165,745 of water receipts as detailed in the Advisory and Finance Committee Subcommittee Report G and below. Appropriated for direct costs, $4,812,859. Indirect costs transfer to the general fund, $1,352,886. And total fund expense, $6,165,745. We've just seen all the precincts on Subcommittee Report F. We can now go to Kevin Canty, the motion for 7B. Your recommendation, Mr. Canty.
This is the Water Enterprise Fund, the first of the enterprise funds you'll be voting on this evening. Each enterprise fund is voted on separately by town meeting, though all enterprise funds were contained in Budget Subcommittee G's work product. The enterprise fund budgets were also reconsidered at the Advisory and Finance Committee's July 8th, 2020 meeting, along with the rest of the budget in regards to the Water Enterprise Fund. In a unanimous vote of 14 to 0 to 0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this section of Budget Subcommittee G's work product, incorporating a net decrease of $102,923 to their original recommendation as detailed in Subcommittee G's Water Enterprise section.
Thank you, Kevin Canty. We're going to go right to the vote on 7B. We don't see anyone.
Sorry, I had to switch to a new deck.
Do we? We don't.
Ran out of slides. So.
Okay. If we can show the vote for 7B, I'm not seeing any speakers in the queue. Once we see that and see the timer, we're going to take a vote on motion 7B. We're continuing with the annual town meeting warrant. We have another 30 minutes, more or less, to continue to try to get through Article 7. We're on motion for 7B, and we see it. We're going to vote now. And the voting has begun on motion 7B. We are displaying each of these substantive motions unless they are unanimous. If they are unanimous, we will move on to the next one. I will read 7C while we're doing the voting on 7B. Mr. Canty moves the town vote to raise and appropriate $8,698,041, items 69 to 73, to defray sewer direct costs and transfer $444,606 for sewer indirect costs to the general fund by raising $8,142,647 of sewer receipts and transferring $1 million from sewer retained earnings. Let's look at the vote on 7B. 108 yes, 10 no, 0 abstentions. Let's go through the precincts and display how town meeting members voted. Looking back now, looking forward on 7C, while you see the vote on 7B, we're told in the Advisory and Finance Report, Subcommittee Report G, that appropriate and direct costs, you'll see $8,698,041. Indirect cost transfer to the general fund, $444,606. Total fund expense, $9,142,647. And as we finish the precincts, we'll be hearing from Kevin Canty. He is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee, and he has been speaking on behalf of his committee with the recommendations that they have made for Plymouth's annual town meeting. This is a summer town meeting. It is the first virtual town meeting. We've now heard from all the precincts. We're going to go to Kevin Canty. And Kevin Canty, your recommendation.
In a unanimous vote of 14 to 0 to 0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this section of Budget Subcommittee G's work product, incorporating a net decrease of $161,374 to their original recommendation as detailed in Subcommittee Report G's Sewer Enterprise section.
We're going to go to the vote. We're going to show the vote on the screen along with the timer. When we see it, we're going to begin the voting, and we have the timer, and now we see the vote. You can vote now. We're voting on motion 7C. This is Plymouth's annual town meeting. Again, coming to you live on Thursday, August 13. We are in a number of locations. There are some of us in the PAC TV studio, 6 town meeting members at Plymouth North High School with in-person technical support. The town officials are at Town Hall in the Great Hall, and we have over 100 town meeting members scattered throughout New England participating remotely with the virtual Zoom webinar platform, the V-Voter platform. They're currently voting with the V-Voter platform on the motion under 7C. They have a few seconds left as they wind down. We will see the vote now. And the total on 7C, 116 in favor, 4 say no, 0 abstentions. We will scroll through to display the vote of your town meeting members. We begin with precincts 1, 2, and 3, and we'll be going through all the precincts, and they'll be coming to 7D, where we have a motion from Mr. Canty, and he moves the town vote to raise and appropriate $715,372, items 74 to 76, to defray solid waste direct cost and transfer $265,131 for solid waste indirect cost to the general fund by raising $899,100 of solid waste receipts and transferring $81,403 from solid waste retained earnings. It's detailed in the subcommittee report G. Mr. Canty, on your motion.
In a unanimous vote of 14 to 0 to 0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this section of Budget Subcommittee G's work product, incorporating a net increase of $15,000 to their original recommendation, as detailed in Subcommittee Report G's Solid Waste Enterprise section.
Thank you. And no speakers. We'll go right to the vote on this motion for 7D. And as soon as we see there's the vote, there's the timer, vote now. You're voting on Article 7D, Motion 7D. Town meeting members, the majority vote, and we'll have a roll call if it's not unanimous. We'll then be going to 7E. 7E, Mr. Canty moves the town vote to raise and appropriate $2,600,306, that is items 77 to 80, to defray airport direct costs and transfer $207,251 for airport indirect costs to the general fund, and by raising $2,807,557 of airport receipts. It's detailed in the Advisory and Finance Committee Subcommittee Report G, and it's shown below in your books. We're winding down on the voting for 7D, and now the votes. 114 in favor, 3 no, 0 abstentions. We'll display the precincts since it's not unanimous. We begin with precincts 1, 2, and 3. And as we show the precincts, we're going to be moving to 7E momentarily. Town meeting is currently in the annual town meeting warrant. We're in Article 7. It is the annual budget for 2021. Town meeting members have moved forward with that budget, and there has been debate throughout the evening regarding it. We're currently on the motion for 7D, and you'll see all the precincts have been voting, and we're going to finish with the final 3 precincts, precincts 13, 14, and 15. And at this time, we're going to go to Kevin Canty, Chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. He'll give the recommendation for 7E. Mr. Canty.
In a unanimous vote of 14 to 0 to 0, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this section of Budget Subcommittee G's work product, incorporating a net decrease of $71,958 to their original recommendation, as detailed in Subcommittee Report G's Airport Enterprise section.
Point of order, we're going to go to Precinct 3, William Cohan. Mr. Cohan, on your point of order. Good evening. Welcome. You need to unmute, Mr. Cohan. Okay,
Mr. Moderator, I voted yes on the previous article. It didn't show.
okay, thank you. That's a yes vote. Okay, and now we're on 7E, and we have no speakers. We're going to go right to the vote on 7E. We'll show. Okay, and OTI is supporting us this evening, and they will be showing that momentarily. We're also having support from PAC TV throughout this town meeting, as well as the panel of guests from town officials. We're continuing through the warrant. We're on 7E, and when it does, there we go. It's on the screen. Where the timer is there. You can vote now. We're voting on 7E. And town meeting members are continuing through the warrant. This is the Plymouth Annual Town Meeting. We have about 24 minutes left in this session. The voting 30 seconds on this particular vote, and after 7E, we're going to go to 7F, where Mr. Canty moves town vote to raise and appropriate $1,685,000, items 81 to 82, to defray cable access direct costs by raising $1,685,000 of cable access receipts as detailed in the Advisory and Finance Subcommittee Report G. This is for the next one. We're now going to look at the vote for 7E. The voting has ended. 117 in favor, no 2, 1 abstention. We're going through the precincts. Precincts 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to continue and scroll through all of the precincts, and then we'll be going to 7F. This is all part of Plymouth's annual town meeting, and this is coming to you live this evening. And we're currently on the motion for 7E, and we will next hear on 7F. Once we go through all 15 precincts, we have 135 town meeting members. You see this last vote, we had 120 voting. And again, that's another 10 above the average for the past 10 years. Town meeting continues with this virtual town meeting where town meeting members are participating remotely. And that concludes all the precincts. We'll now, on 7F, go to Kevin Canty. He is the chair of the Advisory and Finance Committee. Mr. Canty.
In a unanimous vote, 14 to 0 with no abstentions, the Advisory and Finance Committee recommends town meeting approve this section of Budget Subcommittee G's work product as detailed in Subcommittee G's Cable Public Access Enterprise Fund section.
Thank you. And at this time, we're not seeing any speakers. We're going to once again go to the vote. This is the vote on motion 7F. And you'll see the timer. You can begin voting now. "27 seconds, 26. Town meeting members are voting on 7F. And after this, I'm going to give some comments about Tuesday night. And given what's involved, we're going to be concluding and having our motion to adjourn shortly. But I wanted to give a preview of what town meeting will be looking at on Tuesday. But first, the voting has ended. The results, 117 in favor, 4 noes, 0 abstentions. We're going to scroll through the precincts, and we're going to talk to you. First of all, Brendan Brady has a procedural motion, Precinct 10. Mr. Brady, while we're scrolling through the precincts, what is your procedural motion?
Mr. Moderator, I was just going to move to adjourn until Tuesday evening, but it sounds like that's your plan anyway. So
It is my plan, but before we do that, I'm going to announce that Article 8 is withdrawn, and will we then be moving to Article 9. I want to talk a little bit about Article 9 to all of you. You'll see that in the A group, we have 57 items. In the B group, we have 3 items. We've received a number of motions from 3 town meeting members. They were motions to divide the A group and the B group, and in looking at the motions to divide, we thought that what might be easier for town meeting members is to go through each item, and specifically the ones where these three town meeting members wanted to make motions to divide, we could vote them up or down. We've done that in the past, give people an opportunity to ask questions or to make arguments. So absent any other motions to go forward with all of the items, we're going to be taking considerable time. I'd ask town meeting members to look carefully at all of the various motions to amend. They're highlighted. And in addition, for Article 9A, we have a number of people wanting to ask questions in the A group as well as the B group. So in the interest of time for Tuesday night, I've been reviewing with OTI. Town meeting members are really getting up to speed with the voting. It's been going quickly and appropriately. So we're going to be looking at reducing the time to 30 seconds. We're going to have, at this time, approximately 25 or more votes just on Article 9. If you do the math, it could take us an hour just to do the voting and going through displaying the precincts. So we're going to do what we can to try to keep it within the next session, but we'll also be voting for another adjourned session beyond Tuesday in case we don't get through the rest of the warrant. I do see Precinct 10, Alan Costello, wishes to be heard on the motion to adjourn. Mr. Costello.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. Not so much the motion to adjourn, but the instructions you just gave us on Article 9. Maybe you or someone on your staff could tell me, what does the red Q denote in the Article 9A1 section?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Subjects.
What we did was initially we received motions to divide from Everett Malaguti, from Paul Cunningham, as well as from town meeting member Stacy Dela Cruz. And in an effort for what we hoped would be simplicity, I'm going to specifically not only be entering the motions to amend. So for example, let's take the first one. We have a motion to amend Article 9, Item 8.2. So I'll be entering that. We'll debate it. But then the next thing we have is Mr. Malaguti moving Article 9A7. But you'll see there's a question from Mr. Cunningham, A5th. Initially, Mr. Cunningham moved to divide, and then he wanted to vote 0. And I explained to him that's not a motion to vote 0. Rather, you can argue for town meeting not to fund it and to vote no against the Advisory and Finance Committee. So what that is that's a cue for us to know that all of these items are contested, if you will, by at least one town meeting member, and therefore, absent any other procedural motions from town meeting, we would be going through each of these, we would be having discussion, and we would then be taking a vote on each of these at the request of these three town meeting members who have all filed motions to divide.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Precinct 14, Christopher Hoole, again, has a question on a procedural motion. Mr. Hoole, good evening.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion, because I don't believe I heard a formal motion to adjourn. So I'd like to, before that, I'd like to make a motion to move, to hear Article 9A and Article 9B after Article 29. I'm allowed to do that.
It is. That's a motion to change the order of the articles, and I will accept that now. It is debatable. It requires a 2/3 vote, and so his motion is to hear Article 9 after the remaining articles on the warrant. Mr. Hoole, do you care to be heard on your motion to change the order of the articles? Proceed.
Yep, thank you. My motion is simply to allow us to continue to our predetermined time of at least 10 o'clock and hear the other articles before hearing Article 9.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion to change the order? Precinct 4, one came up and then it went down. So Any further discussion before we vote? It's a motion to change the order of the articles, to have Article 9 be after. I see now, once again, Precinct 4, David Peck, on the motion to change the order. Mr. Peck?
Does he mean 29 or 24? According to my paperwork, 29 has no motion, no action.
I think he's meaning the end of the warrant, such as it is, and that would be after Article 29.
Oh,
That's how I'm
after
receiving
29,
it.
okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, we're going to call up on the screen the motion to change the order, putting Article 9 at the end. And here it is, and we're going to look for 45 seconds. You can begin voting now. This is a 2/3 vote. It's to change the order of the articles on Tuesday, and to have Article 9 follow all of the other articles coming before you in the annual town meeting. We've already dissolved the special town meeting, and therefore we cannot move to change or reconsider any of the action in the special at this time, but we have this procedural motion to change the order on Tuesday with Article 9 following all of the other business on the warrant. Town meeting members are voting on that procedural motion to change the order of the articles, and the time is going down. You'll see they have 5 seconds left in which to vote. We will then see the total, and we're going to show it. And 74 vote in favor, 43 in opposition, 2 abstentions. The motion does not carry by 2/3. So that fails this evening. And we are now, unless there's further discussion, we're going to go to vote on a motion to adjourn. Mr. Canty moves that this session of the annual town meeting be adjourned until Tuesday, August 18th at 6 p.m. We're going to call up on the screen. There's the motion to adjourn, and the timer will be coming up, and you can begin voting now. Good evening. I want to thank everyone for your participation this evening in this second session of your first virtual annual town meeting by remote participation. Town meeting members have had very excellent high attendance, higher than average. They had a high on Monday of 125 town meeting members. Town meeting members continue to vote, they continue to speak, they continue to make motions, and they're doing this all virtually from wherever they choose to participate in this remote town meeting. We're coming down, counting the time, 2, 1 second. Again, thank you to everybody. 112 say yes. No, 9 people don't want to adjourn. But we're going to adjourn anyway because majority rules, and that's the way this works. So 9:48 p.m., this town meeting session stands adjourned. Good evening. Thank you.